everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, November 22nd, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we will head over to Alan, where he will speak with Brian Roche, Chief Product Officer at Veracode, to discuss the enhancement of its continuous software security platform with substantial improvements to its integrated developer experience. Alan will then sit down with Rod Stomuller, VP of Solutions Marketing at Aviatrix, to talk about Aviatrix's new solution, Cost IQ, which enables organizations to institute detailed network usage-based, multi-cloud chargebacks, accurately billing individual cost centers for real use. Then, Alan meets with Hilary Barron, Senior Technical Director for Research at CSA, and Tyler Young, CISO at BigID, to talk about how the two companies partnered up to survey 1,500 IT and security professionals to better understand the industry's knowledge, attitudes, and opinions regarding data security in the cloud. Alan will then speak with Darko Fabian, co-founder and CTO at Semaphore, to talk about why starting a new project with microservices may be tempting, but it's almost never a good idea. Then Rebecca will meet with Frank Liu, Director of Operations and ML Architect at Zilliz, to discuss how Zilliz raised $60 million for its open source Milvus vector database. Next up, we're airing episode 3 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. We then go to BMC Exchange VIP, where Mike met with Tim Perkins, Director of IT Hosting and Hybrid Services for Walgreens, to talk about why reliability concerns are driving more IT management platforms into the cloud. Then, Mike interviews Decodable CEO Eric Sammer, as Eric explains how the rise of open source streaming data analytics platforms are driving modern approaches to data ops that are fueling digital business transformations. We then go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con North America, where Alan spoke with Abhishek Saxena, CEO and co-founder of Unscript, to discuss how the Cloud Ops platform is separating user security from automation security. Also at KubeCon Cloud Native Con, Mitch met with Andrew Martin, CEO of Control Plane, to discuss the company, which focuses on cloud native security. We will then finish this broadcast with 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike interviews Igor Volovich, Vice President of Compliance Strategy for Cumulos, as Igor explains why existing approaches towards achieving and maintaining compliance are fundamentally broken in a way that adversely impacts everything from cybersecurity to business risk management. And finally, Mike will interview Remediant CEO Raj Dodiawala, as Raj explains why inherent remote desktop protocol weaknesses require a different cybersecurity approach to prevent malware from moving laterally across an extended enterprise. And that's what we have coming up for you in this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy. Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for November 22nd. First up, Elizabeth Holmes, who was the CEO for the failed startup Theranos, was sentenced to 11 years in prison for defrauding investors. Holmes was convicted back in January this year as part of a 15-year-long scheme claiming the company developed a medical device to do blood tests with just a few drops of blood when there was no such technology. Over the course of those 15 years, Holmes was able to draw several high-profile investors and get on the cover of multiple business magazines. This being said, though, she has since become a symbol of deceit, and the ruling showing how long-term consequences of fraud outweigh any short-term benefits. Next, Disney announced the ousting of CEO Bob Chapek and the reappointment of Bob Iger late Sunday evening. Disney made a 2-year contract with Iger to help return the company to growth with its 40% slide in shares this year. This move is reminiscent of other big tech companies bringing back successful CEOs in times of crisis, such as with Apple and Starbucks. However, for Disney, they will have to cut costs after spending huge amounts of money on acquisitions and building out its streaming business. Disney Plus currently operates at a $1.5 billion loss this quarter, spending money to attract customers and compete with other streaming platforms. There are some concerns as to whether or not this 2-year deal with Iger will be enough to transform Disney, but share prices have since gone up by 10%. Next, in the most recent FTX update, it is said that it owes 50 creditors over $3 billion and that it owes the top 10 of those $1.5 billion. FTX filed for bankruptcy on November 11th, but zooming out, there could be over 1 million creditors facing total losses that are already filed in U.S. cases, with FTX being in contact with multiple regulatory agencies around the world. Additionally, the Bahamas, which is where FTX is based, are investigating whether or not any criminal misconduct has occurred during the company's implosion. Next up, the semiconductor giant TSMC announced that they will build 3-nanometer chips at its Arizona factory that is currently under construction. TSMC says that its 3-nanometer chip, the N3, will offer 70% logic density gain and 15% speed improvement over its 5-nanometer model. TSMC makes approximately half of the world's advanced chips, but the dominance of Taiwan's semiconductor industry brings into question its supply chain reliance. The Arizona plant is part of the U.S.'s strategy to increase U.S. chip making. Several other chip makers have started building the 3-nanometer chips, including Samsung, which is also building a plant in the U.S. On Digital CXO, we have an article about some of the changes that are putting autonomous vehicles on the path towards sustainable success. AVs have the potential to transform business and economies, but the sector is still in its infancy phase. This article will look at some of the changes as far as manufacturing models and governmental policies that could lead this market into maturation. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. On Container Journal, we have an article looking at how Red Hat has made an update to its app modernization toolkit for OpenShift that will allow to add tags to make it easier to classify monolithic Java apps. Red Hat has said that these tools will enable IT teams to pursue a more holistic application modernization process. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. Finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at a survey showing how culture can be a block to DevOps. The survey has respondents from more than 600 IT professionals and found that 73% are saying that organizations are behind in achieving their DevOps goals, with 17% saying that they still consider themselves in a proof of concept model right now. To learn more about the findings of the study, go to devops.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. We're back on Techstrong TV. We've got our next guest lined up here for you. He is Brian Roach. He's with Vericode. And Brian, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Alan, thank you so much for having me.
That's our pleasure. So, Brian, I guess we should start a little bit about, what's your role and of your background.
So I've been with Vericode for about a couple of years now, and I'm Vericode's Chief Product Officer. So that means I lead our product management organization, engineering, cloud operations function. And, a little bit about me, I guess, Alan, I've been deeply immersed in the whole lean startup, pivotal software space for, the last 10, 15 years. And so I come at security very much from a cloud native perspective and have this perspective that, my focus is on delivering secure software, but doing it quickly. And so I have sort of a unique approach.
Absolutely. And of course, look, our audience is really familiar with Veracode. They're one of the pioneers in the AppSec space. Coming back from a lot of the founders come from the @stake and then Symantec. And then, Veracode's had a storied journey through the security world. Probably 20 years at least when you add all that up. I don't know if it was called Veracode 20 years ago. Anyway, but they recently announced sort of a new frontier, a new front in their ever ongoing battle to secure applications and software, and that is around container security. You mentioned the cloud native word, right? And cloud native, we just had a conversation here in the office with some of the analyst team, right? When you say cloud native, is that code word for Kubernetes and containers? Is it code word for stuff coming out of CNCF? Or is it really just mean stuff that's natively built for the cloud, right? But it could be on hypervisors and everything else.
Yeah. Alan, you're right. It's an overloaded term, right? And I think the way that I think about it is, if I were to give you the tweet length description for Veracode and who we have been over the past 16 years is, look, developers are trying to deliver quickly and application security professionals are trying to reduce risk. And so the Veracode platform brings them together in a way that they don't have to choose between delivering software quickly or delivering secure software. And so when I say cloud native, I look at what's going on in the market today. And for many of our customers and many organizations, they're taking all of this legacy value and they're transforming it into running in the cloud, basically. So they're going from monolithic architectures to, microservices and containers, and they're using Kubernetes for orchestration. And what they're doing is that they're composing these new applications that are 12-factor or cloud native, right? But ultimately that can run inside of containers, and they're all being hosted in a runtime or an orchestrator. And what they're doing is they're blindly composing instead of writing applications. Like that, if you look back 15 years ago, developers wrote applications, right? Like I was a developer, we wrote applications. Now you're grabbing open source, you're pulling some methods or some functions, and you're putting your application together because speed is critical, right? Time to market is critical. And so the question is, how do you enable, the vertical stack? So how do you enable all of that open source to be secure, that container to be secure, that infrastructure to be secure, and do that then horizontally through every step of the secure development lifecycle, and bring security to life and have it be pervasive in a way that's not invasive. And I think very simply, Alan, that's the challenge, right? I'm taking legacy value, I'm running it in the cloud, and how do I know it's secure? And how do I do that quickly?
I think that's a great definition of it, right? And that. Therein lies the problem, as they say. So Brian, let's talk about what Veracode's come up with here now. But really nuts and bolts. Our audience is technical. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, okay.
Right, to dive in here.
Got it. Well, I mean, look, just maybe an introduction to the Veracode platform, right? So we deliver core application security capabilities. And so the platform enables the static analysis where you're very much shifted left and securing your code as you're writing it. Your software composition analysis, which, as we all know, with the executive order and the mandate around providing visibility into your supply chain, our software composition analysis tool has become crucially important in that endeavor. Dynamic analysis, which is the assessment of a runtime of an application, et cetera, et cetera. But what we announced more recently, Alan, is the early access of our container and infrastructure as code solution. And what we essentially did was, like any other organization in the world, we are lean. We practice lean, which means we deliver a minimally viable, valuable product, and we seek to get feedback. And what's different is our container security solution is deeply embedded in our platform, but it's delivered as part of the developer's CLI. And so ultimately what we wanted to do with this solution is, in the past, we've delivered sort of solutions first as part of the platform. We wanted to deliver this first as part of the command line interface, because we believe strongly that when you take software security and you shift it further left in the process, you get better results and you reduce your cost and you reduce your risk. So ultimately, we are early access for our container and infrastructure as code solution, delivered first as a developer with a developer focus and embedded in our platform.
So, okay, got it. Kind of standard stuff there, but let's talk about, all right, so a developer runs it from his CLI, hopefully is it before he commits his code to Git? Is it while it's in Git?
It can be anywhere. It can be any one of those steps. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if you look at what we've done with the Veracode platform in the past 12 months, is that we are looking at ways to make our platform more tweakable, more configurable. And one of the ways in which we've done that is we've completely rewritten our policy engine from the ground up. And ultimately, our perspective is, it's your security program. Obviously, we are thought leaders and we are opinionated about how you ought to lead and run your program or govern your developers. But ultimately, we wanted to provide that flexibility. And the same is true with our container solution. We're making it available as part of the CLI. Developers can call it at any step in the process. And we're seeking to provide them immediate results. Whether it's, we're hashing the prior results that we scans that we've done, and we're doing diffs, but the goal is, how do you enable that speed directly inside of the tools that they're using today to enable them to go fast?
Yep. So, but are you actually scanning the container payloads? Are you scanning the container configuration? Are you not scanning at all? What exactly is this container security?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, look, if I were to say to you, what does good look like for a container solution or container scanning? Well, first of all, it's the images, right? You got to make sure that you're starting with the right base images. Second of all, it's your registry. So, where are you storing your images? How do you know who has access to that? Are they private? Are you monitoring them? Does that registry reside on a server that's secure? At runtime, this is where your application security comes in. But are you monitoring your network protocols and payloads and all interactions with the host? When you think about orchestration, are you setting limits on privileged users and what they can access? And then you're looking at the host operating system. And so when you look at our container solution, we're scanning all layers of the container, but we're also scanning for misconfiguration, secrets management. And look, Alan, I would say to you, containers, virtual machines, they used to be an operations problem, right? The goal is to bring development and operations together in a way that they can all deliver results. And containers have fast become a developer problem, and we need to have developer solutions. And so the way that we think about application security, or the application developers writing, it's that you've got your core IP, you've got your open source software, you've got your containers, you've got your infrastructure as code, and you're deploying all this in every step of your SDLC. And so our solution should come to life in every step, whether you're pre-post commit, whether we're doing drift detection when it's in production, essentially enable them to work or operate in whatever capacity. Look, everybody is at a different level of maturity in their security program, right? And so we need to meet organizations and developers where they are in their maturity.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Brian. To me, a good container security program, it can't be one of these things where we're just throwing it at the developers, right? Developers have a lot on their plate. You want them to develop good software, but we want the entire organizations, including DevOps, including SREs and platform engineering and developers. Yeah. It'd be nice to have them use one tool, right? Yeah. They have a common tool with a common framework, reference, whatever, right? So that we're talking the same language. And the security guy. Let's not forget the security people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We all kind of, talking the same thing. Because when I look at container cloud native today, it's the new compute stack. It's the new stack. It's the way everything is developed, CI/CD, integrated, deployed, and then operated. And so you want, in Nirvana, being, if I were king for the day, I'd want one tool that could play at all of those, phases, at all of those waypoints on my train here. And it sounds like you're saying the Veracode tool can be that.
Yeah, I think you just described the challenge that I hear when I talk to customers. And in my position, I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of customers every week. One of their challenges is they're moving away from monolithic, virtually deployed architectures to more cloud native 12-factor ephemeral environments, and are doing this across multi-cloud infrastructures. Their developers are trying to pick the right open source to enable that speed and velocity. They're trying to learn containers. They're trying to learn microservices, right? They're trying to learn new patterns of work, right? They're trying to get their heads around what does lean and lean startup mean to me, and what's an MVP. And ultimately, they're trying to put all this together, and they're saying, oh man, like this is, it's just compounding. It's hard. It's a risk for them. Yeah, it is hard, right? And, the days of, development would bring their code to the wall of confusion and toss it over, and cloud operations would figure out how to deploy it in production. Those days are gone, right? Everybody's integrated and everybody's shifting left, and everybody's working more closely together to identify flaws and issues early on in the process. And so the reason why a platform solution matters is that, look, vendor consolidation, we've seen this year is a pattern for sure. But the second theme and pattern that we're seeing is that, organizations are saying, just give me the easy button. Just give me one solution where I've got my static, dynamic composition analysis, where I can provide my supply chain visibility, but also give me a container solution. And by the way, when you've deployed that container to production, enable me to identify whether or not there's drift in that production environment, or determine for me, in the event of the equivalent Log4j situation, that I know what's running, I know where I'm vulnerable, and enable me to redeploy. Because look, we've another area where we're announcing early access is in our auto remediation capability, which is not only do we find flaws, but we enable you to automatically fix them. And there's a different mentality when it comes to coding fixes, right? Developers need to establish trust in the machine and in the engine that's recommending those changes. But it's a lot different when you look at auto-remediating flaws in a base image or in a container in production. It's just not that controversial, right? Blow away the container, spin it back up again. That's the whole point of containers. They contain our applications or pieces of our applications, and they should just be redeployed, right? We're all moving towards immutable architectures. So I don't want the thing to change, just redeploy it for me. So, we're seeing a whole lot of mileage where we are reducing that complexity by providing that single pane of glass where you can see all of your continuous integration delivery pipelines running. You can see all of your risk in one place, and you see that risk in context. So, do I need to go action this flaw or this vulnerability? Is it buried behind 5 layers VPC and it doesn't matter? Or is it something that can be exploited? These are the ways that you bring velocity and simplicity to development teams so that you reduce the cognitive load on them.
I love it. Excuse me, Brian, we only have a minute or two left because I told you we're probably over 15 minutes, truth be told. But okay. You mentioned it was early access. What exactly does that mean? Are people watching out here? Can they go sign up for this now? When, if not, when? What's the deal?
They can. And in fact, the program is still open, and we're actively receiving feedback. Alan, I got to tell you, I think every engineering leader out there will attest to this. When you release something in early access, right, you get a lot of positive feedback often. I have to say the opposite has been true here. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and we've learned that what we delivered as foundational capabilities, right, was on target. And I think that's a testament to the fact that we've been using this We've been, as we develop software, we've been running this tool internally. So it's been super positive, the reaction. But that having been said, Alan, look, we operate with no pride in authorship. We want to get feedback. So if you are a customer out there or you want to get access to our early access program, we welcome you. We want to get feedback. We want to, when we go GA with a solution that really delights all of the users and all of the developers. And so the feedback has been great. We've delivered something that's on target. That's terrific, but we want to continue to evolve it during the early access program.
So go to vericode.com.
Yeah, or reach out to me. Go to vericode.com or reach out to me. Yeah. So.
And they'll be able to find it, the early access for the container security product.
Hey, Brian.
Not to put you on the spot, last question. When do you think, not an exact date, but a range, when do you think this might be in GA?
I think it's definitely going to be early next year, and we're considering, do we open this up sooner? It's really a question of what features, what functionality is it missing? And like I said, Alan, we're not getting a ton of, hey, like you really missed this.
You missed the boat, right?
Yeah. It's more about could we have more flexibility in the policy, or could we render the results in a different way? But nothing that's really preventing us from releasing it. So that's why we kind of want to open it up to even more than the customers that we have today. We've got about 40 plus customers in there today, which is a reasonable sampling. But ultimately, definitely early next year, and our auto remediation functionality is early access now.
Excellent. All right. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us. Keep up the great work. Come back, maybe around GA time. Come back and let us know, okay?
We'd love to. Alan, thanks, and safe travels this week.
Thank you. Brian Roach, Chief Product Officer, CPO.
That's right.
So our digital CXO, CPO at Vericode. Here on Techstrong. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Techstrong TV segment here. I want to introduce you to Rod Stallmutter. And I hope I got that right. Hey, Rod, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good
to be on the show.
It's great to have you on. I should mention Rod's with Aviatrix, and he's going to explain to us the company as well as a little bit about Rod, and we'll go from there. So, Rod, give us kind of your story.
All right. Well, I've been a networking guy for a long time, going back all the way to Synoptics and Novell, some old names that you may have.
I heard of them, yeah.
But most recently, I was with Nicira doing software-defined networking that was acquired by VMware and became NSX at VMware. And then I joined Aviatrix here recently, as we're really doing very similar things, but instead of virtualizing the data center, we're virtualizing the clouds and doing cloud networking.
Got it. When did you join Aviatrix, if you don't mind?
I joined about almost 4 years ago, so about a little more than 3 years ago. I joined with Steve Mullaney, who was also the CEO of Nicira, and then he joined back in at that time in 2019, because we really saw the world changing. We've been talking about cloud for a long, long time, right? But enterprises hadn't really gone to the cloud yet. They weren't serious about going to the cloud. They were trying things. But about 3 years ago, they really started going to the cloud. And all of a sudden, there was some need for some advanced networking capabilities that just wasn't there as part of the basic constructs.
Excellent. And then COVID happened, and that, I guess, kind of put an accelerator on that whole cloud migration, digital transformations, etc. When you talk about kind of advanced cloud networking, and we're going to get into our regular topic in a bit, but you piqued my interest. What kind of advanced cloud kind of capabilities are you talking about?
Well, really a lot to do with how simple it is, right? In the cloud, most of the time you're having to build things based on basic constructs and doing things like, for instance, updating route tables manually. And it's very complex and it's different in every single one of the clouds. So if you learn how to do it in AWS, and then you have a multi-cloud environment and you need to do it in Azure, that becomes even more complex to be able to do things. So what we do is we upgrade the native constructs and make them the same in each one of the clouds. So now you get consistent networking capability, the way you build networking, consistent visibility, consistent security, and consistent automation. So for instance, we have a single Terraform provider, so you can write one infrastructure as code module. It works across all the clouds.
Love it. Very cool. We were going to talk today, though, about cloud cost transparency. And this is, there are the two worst bills to try to decipher in the world are your cell phone bill. Because though they've gotten better, I'll give the cell phone carriers credit. They have gotten a little better. And then your cloud bill. Cloud bills are, it's very easy to see what the bottom line number is, but trying to figure out how you got there is crazy. But go ahead.
It is. Yeah, I was going to say that there are some tools out there, cloud financial management systems, things like Aptio and Flexera and others that do a good job for the FinOps teams to take, let's say, your AWS bill or your Azure bill and break that down to the accounts that things are charged to, right? So now you know that all these engineering accounts used all of these different instances, and you can add all that up and that gets charged to engineering. What they had a real trouble with, and we kept hearing from our customers, was how do they deal with shared resources? So let's say you have a cluster of next generation firewalls that you're sending traffic through. And there's a whole bunch of different groups that are using this next generation firewall cluster, but you don't have a way to take the cost of that shared resource and accurately define who's using it. So what IT does typically is they either have to absorb the cost themselves, right? Or they peanut butter it across everybody and give everybody an equal charge for that shared service. But now HR says, hey, I'm not using as much as engineering is using. So what we're doing, because we are the network that all this stuff has to go across, is we allow you to define that shared resource and then look at exactly who's using it, which accounts in engineering are using, and adding it all up and saying, hey, engineering is using 50% of that resource and HR is only using 10% of that resource. So now you can accurately distribute those costs in a way that the cost centers are accepting that that's about how much we use.
So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, is this more art or science?
Yeah, it's actually more science, right? It's the ability to have, the actual data that says these accounts are using this shared resource. And we're taking it further than that, looking at what other things are going on. One of the things that we heard a lot from our customers is that egress charges are something that they really have a hard time getting a handle on. And this is because the cloud providers make a ton of money on saying, hey, we'll let you come into the cloud, but if you exit back out of the cloud, we're going to charge you on a per gigabit basis, right? Or if you go between regions, or if you go between availability zones, there's all these little places where you're exiting one part of the cloud network, going either out of the cloud network or into another part, that they're racking up the bill. So we're looking at being able to track those things down so that we can give intelligent insights to say, hey, you could move this resource from one region to another and not have to exit to get to it, because you're doing that, once a week you're sending a big database file across or whatever it is. And because we see what's going on the network, we can actually give intelligent insights about how things could be moved in order to optimize costs.
Excellent. So I guess, I'm your customer. How did I find out? Well, first of all, did I say to myself, look, I already invested in one of these FinOps solutions, and they're good, but they're not giving me everything I need to really understand where this money's going, how do I allocate it? And right, so I guess I come to that conclusion. How do I think of Aviatrix as the company that's going to help me with that?
Well, I think what we are finding is that it's not that people are buying Aviatrix specifically for this cost capability. It's that they're looking at improving their entire network operations, their ability to support business critical applications. And this just becomes an added capability that the infrastructure itself is delivering and allowing them to achieve some of these goals that they're being asked to achieve. Especially from a finance perspective, these days, people are being pressured to show exactly how these solutions are being used. It used to be kind of the Wild West, go out and spend what you need in the cloud. But now as people are moving these business critical apps into the cloud and people are focusing on, how their resources are being used, people are looking for ways to reduce the costs. And so that comes down to really being able to monitor it and understand how they're being used. But I'd say the way that people find Aviatrix more often than not is that they find that the networking capabilities in the cloud have limitations, don't give them the visibility that they need, don't have multi-cloud solutions. So they are then looking for ways to overcome those challenges. And that's how they find Aviatrix.
I got you. Because that's what I thought as well. Because, that seems to be, the cloud cost transparency, to me, is it a must-have or nice-to-have, right? And you got to make sure you got must-haves.
Yeah.
Right, if you're going to have a successful company, and that's, I guess, the way it should be. Let me ask you a question. We talked about the migration to the cloud by enterprises about 3 years ago and continuing during COVID. One of the comments I've been hearing from when I talk to people is, how have the macroeconomic conditions affected digital transformation? How have they affected cloud? What are you seeing over there, Rod?
Well, we're seeing it accelerate, actually. These are things that this cloud is continuing to grow. People are migrating out of their data centers into the cloud, and nothing's slowing that down. Certainly, the macroeconomics are going to, you're seeing our customers are laying off a lot of people. But in terms of their infrastructure and the way they're trying to make their businesses more efficient through leveraging things like cloud for agility and speed and supporting business critical applications like SAP, none of that's slowing down at all.
Interesting. Good. What? We didn't ever even mention the website, did we? I'm sorry. People want to get more information.
Yeah, well, they can always go to aviatrix.com. We've got some really great resources there to find out what we're doing. Also, we've got a really great program for training. We call it ACE, which is Aviatrix Certified Engineer. You can think of it the way, a CCIE for Cisco was back in the day. We have multiple levels of training. There's something called the Associate ACE training that is the first level. It's a 4-hour online course that you can get a free code on the website at aviatrix.com/ACE. And we've got about 18,000 people who have gone through that training today.
Wow.
We get a lot of really good feedback because it's not just about Aviatrix. It actually helps you understand how you do networking in AWS, in Azure, in Google, in Oracle, and then kind of pulls it all together at the end that says, okay, if you're trying to do this in a multi-cloud environment, here's how you need to think about it.
I love it. Hey, can you spell Aviatrix for aviatrix.com for us?
Yeah, Aviatrix. Aviatrix.
Excellent.
It basically is a female aviator, right?
Okay.
Yep. The company was originally founded by a female engineer out of Cisco. And so when they originally named that, that's where it came from.
Love it. Hey, Rod, thanks for coming on and being our guest on Techstrong TV today. Good luck with Aviatrix and come back and visit us.
I appreciate the time.
All right, man. Bye-bye. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be back in just a moment with another guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. We've got another great Techstrong TV segment to bring to you right now. I want to introduce you to two people from the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance. First, let me introduce you to Hillary Barron. Hillary. And Tyler Young. Tyler, welcome. Before we get started, I guess you guys need to introduce yourselves a little bit to the audience. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you give people the Tyler Young story?
Yeah, for sure. So, hey, everybody, I'm Tyler Young. I'm CISO at Big ID, where I'm currently kind of in charge of building out their security program, helping guide their Big ID's products, helping our customers essentially protect and understand and discover their data. Prior to Big ID, I was at Relativity, the leading e-discovery company, building out their security team and program. And I have about a decade in tech, mainly in incident response, cybersecurity, forensics, and threat intelligence.
Excellent. And my mistake, I said CSA. It's CSA and Big ID. Tyler, for folks out here who may not be familiar with Big ID, why don't you give us a little Big ID background too, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So Big ID is essentially a data intelligence platform. What we do is we enable organizations to understand where their data is, connecting to your SaaS applications, understand dark data, connecting to your cloud environments to understand where your data may persist, connecting to your file shares, your on-prem data stores, whatever they may be, and really helping you understand where your data is at so that you can take secure actions on it, whether it's removing duplicate data or deleting data or remediating access to files in your cloud environments, whatever it may be. It's a holistic data security platform that gives you, unfeathered intelligence.
Great. Appreciate it. Hillary, how about you?
All right. So I come from a research background. So a lot of my work is in our ad hoc survey research, but I do focus as well on some of the emerging technologies within CSA. So looking at, emerging technologies isn't necessarily totally accurate. They become mature at a certain point, but looking at IoT, blockchain, quantum safe security is kind of an ever-evolving portfolio of research that I'm focused on. But that's primarily what I do. I used to run our webinar program as well, but I have since handed that off. So it's mostly just research all day, every day for me.
Good for you. So emerged technology. And, before we get started, in case I forget, Tyler, where can people get more information on Big ID?
Yeah, so you can go directly to bigid.com, request a demo, see more about the products. Or if you have questions about our security program, feel free to reach out directly to me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best avenue.
Excellent. And Hillary, CSA, Cloud Security Alliance.
Yeah, we do a lot of different things. So, CSA is focused on providing research and best practices on cybersecurity. We're focused on cloud, but also anything that's kind of related to cloud as well. As I mentioned, I am interested in IoT and lead a working group on that. So we're really focused on just trying to help the community and, the tech community and also end users to be able to utilize cloud securely. All of our research is free. That's a big thing at CSA that we're really proud of. And we have a lot of great members like Big ID that help us make that possible.
Fantastic. And it's CSA.org, I believe, right?
Yeah, cloudsecurityalliance.org is where you can find us.
Excellent. All right. We've got all the housekeeping out of the way. Let's dive in here. Recently, CSA released a report. I believe it was done in conjunction with Big ID. Is that fair?
Correct.
Guys, tell us about the report.
Sure. So initially we were approached, Big ID was like, hey, what's kind of going on in the data security space? It's been, I feel like it's been a topic that's picked up quite a bit over the past year. I don't know what's really been the initial cause of it, but it seems to be one of those topics that's really top of mind for a lot of organizations. So they're like, help us understand what's going on in this space a little bit. We want to know a little bit more about, kind of get a lay of the land of what people are struggling with. Why is this topic kind of coming around right now? And that was more or less what we found is people are struggling with data security. So they're more interested in it right now. When we did this survey, one of the big findings was that, we were looking at, how confident folks are, because we're talking to the security professionals, right? The people that are boots on the ground doing this day in, day out. We were seeing that the confidence levels were okay. And then we asked them about sensitive data, and then they were like, oh, yeah, only 4% of us are like, yeah, we've got this in the bag. I don't know how much of that is us just being somewhat cynical. They always say in the industry that, prepare to be breached or assume breach or something along those lines. So I don't know if that's our cynical nature, but certainly it's alarming when you think about how much data all of our organizations have access to and how much sensitive data we have within our organization. So that was really the big thing that we were like, ooh, this is concerning and something that that people need to be aware of and also be tackling head on.
Tyler?
Yeah, and I think going back to it's not if, but when you're going to be breached. And it's really preparing for that and understanding that if you know where all your data is at and you can remove the low hanging fruit, whether that's sensitive data that's exposed externally, whether you have external data on your OneDrive or G Drive or whatever you're using for data store, remediating some of those simple data exposures can go a long way in release and kind of alleviating some of that pressure from breaches. And so whether it's malicious or accidental, it's the entry point, and then the networks have expanded now where data is really becoming your perimeter. So it's no longer the days of breaching a network, move laterally, and you can find data potentially on a file server. It's now that your data is your perimeter with SaaS applications and the amount of data we're storing in SaaS applications and the connection between SaaS app and SaaS app and the leveraging of the cloud, and it's the ability for a simple misconfiguration to essentially just purge or pour data out throughout the network or wherever you may be storing it. It's just the organizations need to start focusing on this because there needs to be a more data-centric approach to security versus the days of like I said, securing the perimeter, securing the endpoints. That's gone.
So, look, we've certainly seen a resurgence, I think, over the last year or year and a half of the primacy of data, right? It was almost like someone put up the sign that said, it's all about the data, stupid, right? And for a while, we forgot that. I've been in security 25 years, 30 years, right? We got all focused on the AppSec. If it wasn't AppSec, just didn't matter, right? we got focused on a lot of things and almost kind of lost focus on it's about the data. The data is the crown jewels. The data is the payload, right? The mother load. And people may use the app or other vectors or attack surfaces, right? But their target is the data at the end of the day. Even ransomware and stuff, right? They're ransoming, they're encrypting your data. That being said, though, I'm as perverse as this may sound, I'm glad to hear that 96% of people recognize that when it comes to sensitive data, they've got work to do. I mean, it would be great if the work was really done, but it would be a lot worse if 80% of the people said, oh, no, we're good. And we damn well know they're not good, right? So, the 12-step rule, right? Number one is recognize you have a problem. At least we recognize we have a problem, right? Better than not recognizing you have a problem. Of course, the question now, now the question is, well, what do we do about it? And I always find, though, with these kinds of surveys, though, there's like three things that are really important that I take away. So we hit one of them here. What were two other big takeaways from this report?
I think another big one that's pretty relevant to what's going on right now with what we're kind of seeing in the news is we're seeing too much access for third parties and suppliers, and that they actually have similar access levels to our employees, which, in some cases, maybe they do need that access. Maybe there's a valid reason for it, but realistically, I think we have some work to do there in particular. And I think those breaches have really drawn our attention to that. So a lot of organizations are starting to take that more seriously now, but we were kind of caught on the wrong foot there. And we had breaches that made the news, unfortunately, because of that.
Yes, we did. Tyler, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's a few problems here. One, we're giving third parties way too much access, and no one's vetting it. So whether it's a more static thing that's happening in a procurement process and just doing a review of this third party that's coming in and what they're doing, why do they need access to your data, or whether it's, look at your apps you're connecting on your smartphone. Do they really need access to your call list? Do they really need access to your text messages to run Facebook? Probably not. But we're giving that access, and most people just click next and accept and don't actually think about what's actually happening. Or think about how many things are connecting to your Salesforce, whether it's some type of revenue ops tool, whether it's your Slack even. Your SaaS sprawl is happening, and you're just having applications connected to applications, and there's data interchanging. No one's actually looking at what data is interchanging between those things. So now you offboard an app or you offboard an employee, and that data is still living somewhere, and that connection's still there, and no one's actually severing that connection because most people aren't even aware of it. And so these things are never going to go away, but you need to make a concerted effort to start discovering where that data is at so you can take action on it. Because if you don't know where something's at or you don't know what's happening, how can you take action on it? So again, it goes back to maybe that's step two, admitting you have a problem is step one. And then step two is what do I even have? What is my problem? And so really understanding it and being able to discover it is very important.
I agreed. And that, comes right from the first thing too, right? The first step is always awareness that you're having the problem. Third thing, Hillary.
Third thing, one of the big things that we thought was interesting was that a lot of the issues that organizations felt were contributing to the proliferation of dark data was really around issues with staffing, whether that was just not having the knowledge about how to kind of get their arms around that, whether it was we just don't have interdepartmental cooperation, so we've got competing priorities going on, or we just don't have enough staff to kind of get our arms around this because we're creating so much data on a daily basis. So really a lot of those issues are coming back to, staffing issues. And some of that's going to be the skills gap. And then And then part of that is going to be understanding how do we supplement our teams then and give them the information that they need and give them the skill set and give them the tools so that they are able to get their arms around this, because this is a solvable problem, but we have to kind of come up with a plan. And if our people aren't on board and we don't have enough people, then we need to figure out how to supplement them and how to help them, because we can't just let this continue to grow and grow, because that's what we've been doing, unfortunately.
So I have some views on this, but Tyler, I'm going to let you go first if it's okay.
Yeah, so I think with dark data, there's an additional problem here outside of the staffing and like we may not have an idea of how to even start securing this problem. It's the fact that any employee can connect to a SaaS application and directly connect just using their basic username and password to anything else that they have access to. And so it's nearly impossible for security teams without the correct visibility to secure this problem or even stop the problem, because I can go on right now and I can sign up for a free demo or a free SaaS application for 20 different tools, directly connect them to my Salesforce environment, my Slack, and 3 other things that I think can enable my team. And now I think, most of the time people are doing this for the right reasons. They're trying to either generate revenue or reduce some type of friction in the business or enable the business in some way. But as they do that, and as you connect to more and more SaaS applications, more data is being exposed. And then again, the security team doesn't even know what's happening because they have no way of actually, discovering that data or even looking at the data.
You're right. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. But I have an interesting take on this. So part of it is the skills gap. I think part of it is during COVID, we hired a lot of remote people, God knows, right? A lot of remote people. And you're hearing such horror stories about the quiet quitters, like people who just do the minimum amount of work they got to do, but they're probably only working 3 or 4 hours a day. Or people who have 2 full-time positions working at home, right? And neither the twain shall meet, and you don't realize it. The bottom line is we don't know our employees and everyone else who has access to our network anymore. It's not like, oh yeah, that's Hillary down the hall or something, right? We've never seen Hillary from the waist down. It's always on Zoom. Wait, for all we know, God, and so I think that has made a bad situation worse, right? In that we seem to have less, I don't want to say control, but less insight into who our people are, right? As a CEO, I'll tell you, I like having people in the office. I think it just functions better. Tyler, you disagree, I could say.
I don't know that I disagree. I think when it comes down to it, we've potentially relaxed because there's this talent shortage. We've relaxed what our expectations are, and high performance management isn't necessarily happening anymore. The days of these really hyper growth, high paced tech companies holding people accountable and essentially doing reductions in their workforce of low performers and only keeping top performers has essentially went by the wayside. And again, this is just my opinion and what I've seen, but it seems that is the case. And now we see these large scale reduction in force at these large tech companies. And it may be this, we mass hired during COVID. We didn't know what we were getting or who these people are because we've never actually worked with them more than a few hours in Zoom. We don't know how many hours they're even putting in. We don't know what their output looks like. And to some extent, we just need bodies and seats to write code. And it may only take them a few hours a day to do this. And so the rest of the day, we don't care. We're getting what we needed out of them. And so some of this is, I think some of it could be the repercussions of that as well.
I absolutely think it is. And then the other thing is, Tyler, you hit it earlier on, is you want to call it shadow IT, because that's what we were calling it at first, but I don't know if that's still the right name even for it. But here's the bottom line that I do see. Security teams can't wait around, for the proverbial phone to ring. Hey, it's Joe over in development. We just signed up. We got this new tool we really like. We've been using it for a week. And I think we're going to go company-wide with it, right? That's not the way it happens anymore. The security team has to kind of be involved in what the development teams, the DevOps teams, the ops teams, the testing teams, the marketing and business teams, and the HR teams. What are these people doing? Where are they going? What apps are they using? If we wait for one of these apps to pop up and bite us in the butt, we deserve what we get, right? We've got to be more proactive. The business moves too fast for us to be reactive or just like sit back and think people are going to tell us things. They don't.
Yeah, I think it's 100% accurate. And the only way you can start to solve some of this problem with the onboarding of IT or shadow IT or shadow SaaS or whatever you want to call it, the thing that we've done over the last few months is we've injected ourselves directly into the procurement process, where finance will not cut a check or sign off on a PO unless security and legal have fully reviewed the MSA. We've reviewed the tool, we've reviewed the architecture and how it's going to be implemented. And so this is just it's a very strenuous process, and it does take, manual effort and resources, but it's the only way you can start to kind of suppress this issue a bit. I don't know if suppress is even the right word, but hopefully stop the issue to some extent.
Yeah, make it livable. Look, you got people whipping out credit cards and signing up
Absolutely.
for this stuff, and the balance. And I talk a lot about this with people. The balance that you got to strike here is you don't want to drag the business, right? You don't want to slow the speed of business down, but you don't want to expose the business to unnecessary risk. And so there's a balance. Right? Hey, if you know what, security, if you're going to look at everything before we sign on, you got 24 hours. If I didn't hear from you in 24 hours, I go forward. Right? We do it. I got a little nothing of a company here, but that's the kind of stuff we do here. Right? You've got a window to object or forever hold your peace, kind of at a shotgun wedding. And I don't know, bigger organizations have a harder time moving at that pace, but that's the pace of business today, and it's something we need to, you got to find your equilibrium. Guys, we're running low on time. Hillary, anything else in the findings you want to share?
The last big thing that we really had was just that a lot of security professionals are assuming that they're going to get breached in the next year. I don't think that's a particular surprise, and based on what we found, it's like, that makes sense.
And they probably will be, but
yeah. But,
yes.
Definitely one of those things that it's like, well, we know some of the problems that we need to tackle and what we need to get our arms around. So hopefully the report kind of helps organizations identify those problems within their own organizations, and be able to help them tackle them in the coming year.
You know what would be interesting? Take these same set of questions now and go ask non-security people. Go ask the developers, the DevOps, the system, the SREs, I forgot what the new thing now is. System architects or whatever, not architects. Infrastructure, whatever. Go ask the other people, not security people, and see if they share that level of pessimism, because they may just be whistling, happy days are here again, blue skies. Right? And platform engineers is what I was thinking of. I apologize. It would be a really interesting contrast. Good stuff. Go ahead, Tyler.
I would say I think that's exactly what you'll get. I think it's security. Honestly, like you couldn't have said it better. Enabling the business. That's really what we're here to do, right? Build guardrails, whether they're DevOps or platform engineers, so that they can't make mistakes. That they do make mistakes, security catches it and stops it, and the continuation of the development process. Or if it's employees, and making sure that you have defense in depth to block attacks and block potentially clicking a phishing link to make sure that doesn't happen. It's really about enabling the business to work securely, and that's on security. And then there's also an education aspect, whether it's working with your developers to understand vulnerabilities in code, or whether it's working with all of your employees just to understand phishing and just basic concepts. I think that goes so far, because then, like we mentioned earlier, you will get those calls from John in DevOps to say, hey, somebody's sharing a password in a Slack channel. Those things start to happen when you educate the business.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to do the right thing. At least I fundamentally believe that. Most people want to do the right thing.
Amen. I hope so. Hey, last thing, for people who want to get more info on this report and check it out, where can they go?
If you go to cloudsecurityalliance.org and go to our research section, there will be recent publications that'll be listed in that hero bar, and it'll be right at the top there. The title of the report is Understanding Cloud Data Security and Priorities in 2022.
I love it. All right, guys, thank you both, Tyler, Hillary, for coming on and discussing this a little bit with us. Good work. Looking forward to more reports and more info to come. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest, actually, we haven't had anyone from his company in a long time. My guest is Darko Fabian. Darko is the CTO of Semaphore. If you haven't heard of Semaphore, you might have used some of their stuff without even realizing it. But he'll explain it all to you. Hey, Darko, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. So as I mentioned, Darko, you're the CTO at Semaphore. Why don't we start a little bit about you, though? Tell us, a little bit about Darko, and then tell us about Semaphore.
Yeah. So actually, I started like computer hardware and then went into web, straight after the university. And not long after that, I started Semaphore with my partner, Marco. And that was like a bit over 10 years ago. So for last 10 years, I'm working on Semaphore CI. It's like a continuous integration, continuous delivery service. And we work with, a lot of companies in various domains. And what is going to be our topic today, microservices, we speak with our customers a lot about that. So I would love to explore that topic further.
Absolutely. Before we do, the website for Semaphore.
It's semaphoreCI.com.
SemaphoreCI.com. Just want to make sure people know that. I believe it's SEMAPHORE.
Yeah.
.com. Oh, Semaphore CI, right? For continuous integration.com. Okay, we got that out of the way. We're going to talk microservices. So, everybody's abuzz about Elon Musk and Twitter and what the heck's going on there. I saw an interesting tweet from Musk that got highlighted in the news yesterday that said they're going to rip out something like 80% of all the microservices in Twitter and just use the 20% that they need for the thing to run, and it'll run better as a result because the rest of it was all bloatware and so forth. Look, I'm not a fan, I'll be honest with you, of them, and I'm certainly not a fan of what's going on at Twitter. But I'm saying to myself, is 80% of the microservices just bloatware, as he said? Has microservices kind of joined the thing it was supposed to stop? How bad could it be? As we move towards microservices, right? No less than Martin Fowler and Sam Newman, have come out and said that, well, if you're starting a greenfield application, maybe it's not the best idea to start it, in a microservices-based architecture. Don't design it initially for a microservices type architecture. That seems to run counter from what we're hearing or what we've seen in the last couple of years, which is, look, if you're doing a greenfield kind of app, why not? You don't have any legacy to worry about, right? Do it from the get-go. What do you think and why?
Well, I'm definitely going to answer your question, but to give a bit of a context. So 10 years ago, when we started our, a SaaS product, we used Ruby on Rails, as a lot of startups from that era did. Let's say about 4 years ago, we started more aggressively chopping up that monolith into, separate services. We have about 25 of them right now. And we also have around 25 engineers.
So that's a good ratio, I guess.
Yeah. And we understood our domain very, very well at that point. And I'm not sure if I would call those 25 micro. I don't know how do we set up scales. So we decide what's not a micro, what's a mini, and so on. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I know. It works for us very well. But our domain is also specific. There are a lot of, asynchronous, long-running jobs. Attributes of the system are maybe a bit different to a typical web application and so on. I mean, the other experience that I have is, speaking with a lot of customers. So vast majority of our customers are, startups with less than 500 engineers. And, the most time that we spend talking to are the most, successful ones that have most of the challenges. And those challenges are also usually in the realm of, what's the speed of their, feedback loop and how fast they can ship. As they scale from, 50 engineers to maybe 200 engineers and so on, they start to encounter various of those challenges with shipping, independently and shipping, without significant delays. A vast majority of them jump into that ship of like microservice, and they start that transition. That transition takes years. And one very important thing to define is what is the current biggest bottleneck, and have we exhausted all the other tools that we have in our toolkit before we make that transition. In that realm, I think it's very important to have a scientific rigor into defining what the bottlenecks are and what are really, the solutions to those problems. And in that realm, I would say it's important to be successful in order to move to microservices, and that that you would need to scale your engineering team, above a certain size, that transition would pay off. So that's the round that I can comment on. I haven't started, a company or a service application, greenfield project with microservices. So it's hard to comment on that. But there are many good things that you lose when you move to microservices. Generally all the guarantees that the database provides are gone. Just onboarding to a project becomes, a bit of a hurdle. So yeah, those are some of the.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me ask you a question, though, Darko.
You've got, as you said, about 25, let's call them services, whether they're micro, mini, or in my mind, if they're a service, a thread, if you will, making up, part of the app, it's a microservice. I don't really distinguish micro to mini.
Yeah.
You got 25 of them running on 25 engineers. That sounds pretty damn good. I mean, it's not a large team by any means. It seems to be running well. Is it that you guys are special and the average customer can't do that? Or because, how much more scale do you need? It's 1-to-1 there.
Yeah. Well, we understand the domain very, very well. I mean, over the course of first, 5 or 6 years, we kind of rewrote a significant portion of our application actually a couple of times, as we were, running and growing, well, everything was still as a part of monolith. So we understood the domain very, very well. We were reasonably successful that we knew that, this is going to be around for the next decade or so for sure. It's worth the investment. And then, chopping those pieces up was not a big hurdle for us. And it didn't backfire in any significant way. However, there was a significant learning curve that we had to go through. So yeah, in that term, I don't think that we are special in any way, but I would say that we really well knew our domain. And starting a greenfield project, it's different. You're still finding yourself. Where are the boundaries for your domain? How do you separate things? What are the things that's worth investing in? What are the things that are going to be a throwaway things? So all those components are, I think, crucial for a successful transition.
So I'm just playing devil's advocate here a little bit. Starting a new project, a greenfield project like this, whether you use microservices or not, it's a bit of learn as you go, right? Things don't always work the way you thought. You make changes, improvements, iterations. I mean, that's key. That's like classic DevOps, right? You got your feedback loops. You iterate, you reiterate, and iterate yet again. And it gets better. Whether you use microservices or not, that's the way of it. However, there are distinct advantages to using microservices versus a monolithic architecture. You want to change something out, tweak something, etc. And there's more. Those aren't the only advantages. At some level, how do you I'm from security. It's all about managing risk, right? How do you manage the risk here? How do you manage the advantages of microservices to the disadvantages and then make an intelligent decision?
Well, I would start with people and, figure out what's the composition of a team. Firstly, are those the people that have prior experience with working with microservices? Because one of the biggest disadvantages with microservices is that you have a lot of network connections between them. And that's just, more expensive and has many attributes that you don't have to deal with when something is within the single process of like operating system. So that's the biggest thing. And if your team has team members have a lot of experience with working over the network and so on, that's a plus. If your team is composed of engineers who have some prior experience working with microservices, that's a big plus. And I would say on top of that, you have to figure out what's the level of your engineers. Because, if it depends if it's a project within a well-established and successful company or if it's a startup. So, within startups usually get, initial set of engineers that should, hit the product market fit, correctly. And they should make it to run for 100 customers or maybe a couple of 100 customers. Then potentially either those engineers are going to, develop and mature, or you will have to replace them. And then if you become really, really successful, then you will get that kind of engineers that are not going to scale from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 10, but from 10 to 10,000. So within the startups, I would say, be frank with yourself and your team, in figuring out what's the experience level of those engineers, because there are also operational issues with running microservices, Kubernetes and, a lot of things, Mesh and so on make some of those things easier, but there is still a significant overhead. So, I mean, as you can see, I'm very much into that mindset of, a startup and starting a company and the project, from scratch, because that's what vast majority of our customers are. If that team is composed within, a well-established, company, and there is a new greenfield project, and you have like a set of excellent engineers with a lot of experience under their belt, then it might be different. But I would say that's the biggest thing that you have to weigh in.
Excellent, Darko. This has been a great conversation. I want to make sure we semaphore. We spelled it before, SEMAPHORECI.com. I'm interested in you're seeing a lot of customers doing a lot of CI, right? the way we build applications today, I call it like Frankensteining them. We take a lot of components, stitch them together, and you get an integration and deployment. It's your application. It kind of lends itself to a microservices architecture, no?
Yes, you could say so. Yeah.
I mean, they're already threaded like that, so to speak, and so I don't know. Anyway, I want to thank you for coming on Techstrong TV today and chatting with us. This is a question, let's see how Twitter does eliminating their microservices, but it's also something relevant to our audience out there, into microservice or not. That's the question. Good luck at Semaphore. Come back and join us again.
Thank you so much.
All righty. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong, and we'll be right back.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Techstrong. I'm your host, Rebecca, and today I'm really excited as I am here with Zillis. The creator of the popular open source vector database, Milvus, has recently raised $60 million in funding in this economy. Now, with downloads surpassing the 1 million mark and production users increasing by 300% from last year, I'd like to welcome Frank. Hey, Frank, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me, Rebecca.
No problem. Hey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So, I've been in and around, I would say, the AI ML space for probably the better part of 7, 8, coming up on 9 years. I first started off at Yahoo, so a much larger company. And, we were doing a lot of computer vision and trying to put a lot of machine learning models into production, right? After that, I actually did my own startup. And also what we were doing there is very different. We were doing these, using machine learning to do indoor positioning on these very low power IoT sensors. And now, I'm here at Zillis, and we're doing a vector database, right? Working on unstructured data.
No, that's phenomenal. Now, it's really exciting. You guys, once again, I have to say congratulations on the $60 million in funding. What can you tell us about that? Are there any big plans in the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess first off, I'd like to thank our investors for believing in our mission and believing in what we're doing. But I think, this latest round of funding, I think, is really going to help us scale out our cloud service as well as our teams here in Silicon Valley, right? So we are a company that is based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're actively looking to bring folks on, to not just to bring folks on, but I think to educate a lot of the industry about what a vector database is, right? What is unstructured data processing? Why is it something that pretty much, I would say, close to every organization should take a look at? I think building out the platform, building out everything from engineering to go to market, that's really what we're going to be using the latest round of funding for.
Well, great. Well, with that said, I have to, just dive in and say, what is unstructured data?
Yeah, great question. Unstructured data, it's got a fancy name, but really unstructured data just means anything that can't really be stored in a table-based format, so in a traditional relational database, anything that doesn't really have a predefined data model, right? So, for example, strings, numbers, tables, or even JSON documents. If we look at a database like MongoDB, these are all meant to store structured data. If you look at unstructured data, a great example that I like to use is human-generated data. So images, video, audio, text, natural language. These are all examples of unstructured data. But I think there are a lot of less mundane or less boring examples too, right? So for example, geospatial data, right? User profiles. What are some other ones that I can think of? IoT streams of IoT data. These are all examples of unstructured data, and there's so much more of that out there than structured data today. Probably if you look at 1970s or 1980s, most of the data that was being generated was structured. But today, I would say, coming up on 80 and soon to be 85, 90% of all data today is unstructured data. So we need a way to be able to store, index, and search across all data.
So I find that fascinating. You say that 90% of the data that's out there is unstructured. And it's not until now that I'm starting to hear of it. And I'm just like, okay, that's fascinating. Now, and just so viewers and listeners out there understand, so structured data, that would be kind of like, just a basic explanation would be, your date, calendar date, similar to that, correct?
Yeah, exactly. A date, anything that you can really store in a table or a JSON document. These wide column stores, you can also consider them structured or semi-structured databases. But yeah, and I think, following up on that is, the big reason as to why, unstructured data is probably not a very common term is that there's really, I would say up until today, up until, the era of AI, there really hasn't been a great way to allow computers to understand all of these different pieces of unstructured data, right? And, what we have today at our disposal are these really, really powerful machine learning models. And they generate these embeddings or these vectors, right? These floating point vectors that are really, really good representations of the input data. So the analogy that I like to use is this, right? So if we have all these machine learning models, and these are really the languages that computers speak. So, you and I, we're speaking English right now, folks, there's a lot of languages out there, German, French, Italian, and these ML models, the embeddings from these ML models are the words, right? Are essentially the way that computers express or embed, if you want to say, a particular piece of unstructured data. And that's why, I think that's why we're coming up on an era where you're going to see more and more folks start to use vectors or start to use these embeddings in their businesses.
No, that makes sense. After, I spent some time cyber stalking, the company and, reading the blog. And it was, it was kind of like a eureka moment. It was like, wow, with the, as much, with all of the videos that are floating out there and pictures, and none of that stuff is classified well. And, when we search through Google, that's kind of that. I mean, they have a pretty good pretty good way of structuring the data to find, the image based on what you're looking for. And it just had me curious, or, it hit my the top of my brain where I was just like, wow, this is really great. And so I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the vector database. Mm-hmm. So what are some well-known use cases for the vector database?
Yeah, so you mentioned video. You mentioned video being one of them. For us in particular, our vector database, our core vector database, our core technology is open source called Milvus. And, we've looking at the folks who have used Milvus for different applications, I think we see a wide, just tons and tons of different applications. But I think I'll go over a couple of pretty big ones and also some ones that I like as well. I would say the first big one I like to talk about is video analysis, and especially as it relates to targeted advertising. Mm-hmm. So if you look at, you were mentioning video, you were mentioning YouTube videos. There's something like 720,000, probably more, hours of YouTube videos uploaded per day. That's a lot, right? That is a ton. And, again, I don't really know what algorithm YouTube uses in the background, but my guess is that it's based off of titles, or it's based off of the description of the video, or perhaps even some comments in these videos, right? So, being able to analyze actually what's going on in each of these videos. We can take a very long one, cut it into 10-second clips, and embed all of these, turn them into vectors, and be able to search across all of these vectors. That's something that's really powerful, right? For recommendation systems or recommender systems is another big one, right? So if I have products or if I have UGC that I want to recommend to a user or to let's say a customer, that's one thing that you can do in a vector database. Another big one is actually personalized search or semantic search. So, another great example that I like to use of that is, electrical engineering and computer science are two very, very related fields, right? But there's really no overlap there in terms of the text itself, right? A traditional text search engine might take computer science and group it with, let's say, social science, which, these are actually two very different fields, right? Yeah. So with, leveraging the power of modern ML, of deep learning, vector databases are able to really group these things together semantically and enable you to do much better semantic text search or personalized search. These are, three of some of the big ones. One of the ones that I really like is something that we actually did for Cleveland Museum of Art. And I really like this one in particular because I think it really shows folks the mission that we're trying to achieve, which is, Cleveland Museum of Art, they don't have like a massive, they're not like Google or Apple where they have like a massive, these massive engineering team, a ton of engineers and a ton of resources, right? Yeah. But still, they were able to create this really, really awesome app called, I believe it's called ArtLens AI. I encourage you to go check it out. It's really cool, where you can actually take a picture of, let's say, a particular landmark, or do a particular pose, and you can find art that's very similar to that particular, let's say, pose or picture that you took. And they, the team over there, hats off to them. They did this, and I want to say they were able to build this in, I want to say, like a week or 2 weeks. With Milvis as the underlying piece of infrastructure. And, that's always one of the examples I like to talk about because we really try to democratize and make available to everybody a lot of this unstructured data processing. Mm-hmm. And I think that really, that particular application really highlights that really well.
That's interesting. So with Milvis, they were able to create this app that allows you to just take a picture, let's say, of any structure or any pose in that painting, and then anything else that's similar to it would pop up.
Yeah. So something similar in Cleveland Museum of Art's database, it would pop up. Yeah. So you would be able to do, it's like a reverse image search. And, I think it also illustrates, I think, the wide variety of modalities that we can target as well. So, embeddings, vectors themselves using them as a representation for your input data that allows you to represent, let's say, just tons of different types of unstructured data, right? One of the things that we did with Compass is they actually had these floor plans, and they turned them into embeddings as well, and they were able to do this floor plan search and search for houses in Milvis that way. So yeah, really cool, and I'm looking to see what the future holds.
That is pretty neat. So I mean, as a consumer myself, if I'll go out and say Wayfair. I'm on Wayfair.com. I'm looking for a particular piece of furniture.
Sure. Yeah.
I see it. I see the furniture at another furniture store. I can just take a picture of it, upload it into, let's say Wayfair was using, Milvis. Then it would come up with everything that's similar in their database to it.
Yeah. And semantically similar as well, right? So you'd be able to search, through the images and not just based off of the product text or titles or descriptions.
Interesting. Okay. That is neat. Now, to help our viewers better understand how and why are vector databases really important? Why are they so important right now?
Yeah, wow, that is a loaded question. So I think I sort of touched upon it a little bit earlier, but I'll go a little bit deeper into it as well. I think you see so much more unstructured data out there. 80% of all data today is unstructured, and that percentage is only rising. And we also have these great tools. We also have these amazing machine learning models, based on these deep neural networks, that allow us to represent a lot of our input data. And as I want to say that this particular type of, vector search itself, using vectors as a tool in search, I think that's been around for quite a while. So, back when I was, right after graduation, when I was at Yahoo, we were actually doing, this very, very large scale similarity search as well. But we didn't have anything like Milvus, or we didn't have anything like a vector database. And that, I think, development for that particular project, I think if Milvus was around during that period of time, this is back in like 2015, 2016, I think it would have made everything so much easier. And I think people are, as we move to 2022 and coming up on 2023, I think folks are realizing why vector databases, why vector search and why using embeddings is so powerful. And I think, having a database that's going to abstract away that entire layer for you, managing and searching your unstructured data, I think that's something that's really powerful and something that hopefully most folks will be adopting very soon.
No, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, can you explain what some of the companies, like on your website, you guys have some really great clients that are using Milvus, like Walmart, IKEA, eBay. Now, could you talk about how they're using vector database to improve the customer experience overall?
Sure. Yeah. So, I'll start with eBay, and they're actually using. So they have 50 million products on eBay. Probably more at this point, and they have a lot of these users as well. And what they want to be able to do is recommend products to users. They have this sort of product recommendation email list, and they want to be able to recommend, let's say, based on what I have purchased in the past, what I might be interested in the future. So that's really how eBay is using it there. When it comes to Walmart, Walmart uses Milvus to actually search catalogs, and they have these language models that they use to embed product titles and descriptions into vectors, right? So, and then, when they do a search, when a user comes into Walmart and they do a search, the description is passed in and really embedded by that same language model. They'll go and search across 600 million items, or actually not really items, vectors, inside of the vector database, and that's how they do large scale and scalable search that way. And I think you see. Definitely, I think based on these particular applications, we do see product recommendations being a pretty large one. But there are others as well. As I mentioned, video analysis, especially short videos, and personalized search as well. We see quite a few of those.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, are there other non-retailers that are using vector databases? And if you're allowed to talk about it, what other ways or unique ways is this being done?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say in terms of, retail, I think is definitely only one of the components, one of the particular use cases, is one of the many applications for vector databases. We do see a lot of, as I mentioned, for example, Compass is one of the folks that's using our stuff as well. We have short video platforms, and I think they're currently all using the open source version of Milvus. It's freely available to everybody. For any folks I think watching now, I highly encourage you to go check it out. But yeah, I think the different, Opera, Bigo, Tokopedia, they're all using Milvus in some way, shape, or form as well. And when it comes to sort of some of the lesser known applications, I would say this is one that I didn't mention earlier, is molecular search. So you have these. You have, again, I'm not in biotech, but you have these when you do drug discovery with AI, when you do this sort of this ML-driven drug discovery, you want to be able to, let's say, search for new compounds that might target a particular symptom or a particular disease. And out of a catalog, let's say 800 million or close to 1 billion of these compounds, and turning these molecular structures into a vector and searching across them that way. That ends up being actually a really, really scalable and powerful way to do things. So this is something that we did for, again, they were using open source Milvus. This is something that we did together with a pharmaceutical company. And another one of the really, it's pretty out there. It's a little bit different, I think, from what most folks would imagine a vector database can be used for. I think definitely it's more associated with machine learning, semantic text search these days. But I think it just goes to show you that the applications are really numerous, right? And it's beyond just search. I think leveraging search to do a more complex set of tasks is really what a vector database is there for.
Got it. Okay. So this is really unique. And, I'm excited to see where this goes, especially going into, next year. What are your thoughts? What do you foresee how big the unstructured data market growing to be?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. I would say, in terms of total size of the market for unstructured data, in the next couple of years, I could see it probably getting up to something like 10 billion, quite large. And really, I think that's only going to grow in the future. I think, again, if we look at structured data back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that actually started off with a really, really strong need. There were a lot of folks who needed to store data in these table-based databases. And today there's so much unstructured data out there, and there's a need for that, right? And that need is only going to grow larger and larger as we move into the future. And I really do envision a day, one day at a certain point where folks will say, okay, I'll have, we don't really plan to replace a lot of these traditional databases. That's not really what we're trying to do, but we're trying to target a different type of data, unstructured data. I think, as we move into the future, organizations will have databases for both types of data, structured and unstructured. Milvus hopefully being one of them. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was saying that's exactly what I was thinking. I could see this becoming a necessity overall. Everybody's focus is on the structured data. And it's, if there's 90% or 80% of the data that is just out there that's not used, so much is, the possibilities are endless from this point on. There's so much that can be said and done there. No,
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. Now, let's say if our audience wants to get out there and, download, try, or request a demo, where do they go to schedule some time with somebody from your team?
Yeah, and you can always feel free to reach out to me directly, either through email. I'm on Twitter as well. Also on our website, there's our managed service is actually currently in early access, but that is scheduled to come out. That is scheduled to be GA, to be open to everybody later this month or early next month. So yeah, that's on our website, or always feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to schedule a demo that way as well. I'm really, Milvus, of course, is open source. It is freely available to everybody on GitHub, MILVUS. And I look forward to chatting with all the different vector database users out there.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to hearing more about Milvus and Zillis in the future.
Of course. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Take care.
Previously on Engineering the Change.
The program at BocaCode was amazing.
My career has completely changed from barely being able to, hold down a job to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
BocaCode has built me up.
If you grant me the scholarship, like I said, I will share my knowledge with people, with women or immigrants.
Dreamed of having an opportunity to show the world, how great, I can be.
I feel that anything I do my best in. So wherever I end up, I'm going to do the best I can to make sure I'm making a positive impact. So this scholarship would definitely assist me in changing the trajectory of my life.
Excited to tell Carly about her winning. She is so pumped to really embark on her career as a software engineer. All right, Carly, we got the whole camera crew with us. All right, come on in, guys. We're coming in. Carly, I'm sorry, your name?
Harold.
Harold?
Yes.
So we're making this presentation of $10,000.
You got it? Yeah.
Puppies. Just go right in.
Is this?
For sure? Oh, yeah. Camera.
Huh? What?
Puppies coming over here.
Hey, how you doing?
Donald, we're here. Hey, man. How are you? I want to present you with this.
Oh, my gosh.
We had a tough time. We couldn't pick the finalists. You guys are all great. You're going to be really great engineers. So you're in.
Oh, my gosh.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. This is a very awesome opportunity, and I look forward to strive for the best. Awesome. Thank you.
You're going to be a great engineer, man. Thank you so much, Donald. This was by far the strongest class of people we had who applied for the scholarship. We were able to get it down to 3 finalists, but then in meeting with the judges, we couldn't pick a winner. So what we decided to do is just pick all 3 finalists as winners, and so we want to make this contribution to your life.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to award Stephanie Sanchez as one of our 3 Spring 2022 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship. Stephanie, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group. We are a tech media company based here in Boca Raton, Florida, and we have been for 8 years. I've been a resident of Boca Raton for 20 years now, and it's always been one of my hopes, aspirations, is that South Florida would become a tech hub. So we opened this program, it's called Engineering the Change, to underserved communities including women, people of color, but any underserved community in the tech space, right? When I look back, and we have some of the past winners here with us, and I look at the difference it's made in the community, in their lives, it's something to be really proud of.
So, one of the things that Boca Code really takes is partnerships with companies like Techstrong and other local companies, because we need them to, to help support the school, and we need them to to hire and interview our students as well.
I'm going to introduce some of our past winners and just have them briefly talk a little bit about how their life has gone since taking this class.
When I received the scholarship, I had a lot of mixed emotions. I was scared but excited for this new chapter. I had worked in the tech industry, but I had never been in an engineering role. The people at Boca Code, Todd, who I affectionately call Coach, because I kind of think of him as the coach in a game, they guide me step by step the whole process. When I graduated from the cohort, I had over 10 offers from tier 2 and tier 1 tech companies, and I had my pick, which was the first time in my life I really had to make a choice where it was completely my decision.
The scholarship changed my life really from 0 to 100.
As I said before, I was in a state that I was really lost in terms of my career. I had a neuroscience degree from FAU, but I couldn't get a job. Once I got the scholarship and I did the 10 weeks at Boca Code, it completely changed my life to better, because now I have found actually my passion, which is not just tech, but being able to help women get into this field.
Winning the scholarship was once in a lifetime opportunity to change my career. The program at Boca Code was amazing. I studied a lot of fundamentals of software engineering, and I proved myself that I'm capable of being a successful developer. At that time, I couldn't even imagine how I would need this job in 3 months when the war hit my homeland, Ukraine, and this salary of software developer gave me opportunity to help Ukrainian people in this hard time.
So this year, we wound up with 3 finalists for the scholarship, and we brought them into our panel of judges, and each of the finalists were interviewed. And then the judges got together and we had to pick just one. We tried to pick just one, and we really couldn't pick just one. And there were 3 outstanding candidates. And so what we've decided is to give all 3 of them scholarships. First person is Carly Dorless.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you for the opportunity. So
I'll hold the check for you.
I will do my best to be successful and to help other women and other people.
Our next winner of the Engineering the Change Scholarship for 2022 is a gentleman named Donald Vizio, and Donald will tell you his story. Donald, come on up.
First of all, I want to thank Techstrong, Todd, for introducing me to the scholarship. And, this is an amazing opportunity coming from Haiti. And I hope with this opportunity that Techstrong and Todd introduced me to, I hope to introduce it to others just like myself and give back to my community and show them that, software engineering is cool. It's not just for nerds.
Our third winner for this year's Engineering the Change Scholarship is Stephanie Sanchez.
First of all, thank you both for this opportunity, and congratulations to my fellow recipients. I know we're going to make a significant change in the world. I come from a background of social work, and so I hope to be able to continue to put the people aspect in technology as we help others around us. I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of this. Thank you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, we're at BMC Exchange and we're talking about how Walgreens is using the SaaS edition of Control-M to apply orchestration more widely across their entire organization. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You guys have been a customer of Control-M and now you're moving to the SaaS edition. What kind of drives that? What's the shift and what are you guys trying to change or accomplish?
One of the areas that we're trying to modernize is around our batch processing. Currently it runs on one of our mainframes, which you'll hear in the industry, many people try to move away from the mainframe, but you just seem to can't get over that hill. But also we have a single point of failure with the mainframe. So our objective is to shift it to a cloud solution to where we have a little bit more self-service and automation for our developers to be able to roll out more of the batch jobs on their timing as opposed to having to go through a mediator. What that does, it removes that single point of failure in the event that if we do have an outage, it doesn't cause that impact of revenue to be skyrocketing to the business, but allows us to also be able to control how we can deploy, how we can make sure that we're meeting those future business demands coming down.
Ultimately, will this be kind of a hybrid play, because you'll still have the mainframe for a while and you'll have the SaaS edition in the cloud? So, how long a transition is this, or will both run together simultaneously for a period of time, or maybe forever, given the mainframe's been around for 50 years?
Yeah, we don't want it to be forever because that TCO is still there. We don't want the double run cost. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we have great communication with our business partners, our PIOs, and making sure that they're committed to have those applications, first of all, that they have in transformation programs, that they do retire on time. And then in that parallel effort, while we are shifting those jobs to the cloud, we want to make sure that we meet the timeline so that we don't incur additional licensing expenses. So again, within the next 18 months, we feel that that's a reasonable amount of time to be able to accomplish that, but we want to quickly make sure we reduce that double run cost as much as possible.
So what attracted you to Control-M? I mean, you're already a customer before. There's a couple other options out there. What made you land again on Control-M?
We have a division that's over in the UK that was already using Control-M, and so our objective was to try to make it as a global solution. And so we did our own RFP, given that we were a little bit behind schedule, to make sure that it was the right solution and not have multiple tools or software across the organization, but to streamline it into one single pane glass purpose. And so once we chose Control-M out of all of the other products that we did our RFP with, we were very satisfied knowing that it would meet our demands. Also, it was it could fall into our global solution model that we were looking into. And it was very quickly and easily to deploy and build the environment up. And we're finding out that it's very easy in working with our developers and the app owners to shift those jobs from the legacy over to the new platform.
Are you using it to orchestrate technical processes or business processes as well? Is it kind of doing double duty?
I think it's a combination of both, because as you see, business models change. They never stay the same. And so we want to be able to quickly adapt, not only from a business model perspective, but also as technology changes. And that puts us in a better position to make sure that our front-end customers at the store, we're making sure that we have those proper inventory items from a supply chain, making sure that all those interdependencies are working together across the different business units so that we can deliver on time and meet those expectations.
We hear a lot about application modernization these days, technical debt, reducing that. Is that a priority for you guys, and what's
Yes.
driving that conversation?
Tech debt. The challenge with tech debt is that you put an application on a specific platform and the mentality is you never get off of it. You never modernize, you never add enhancements, you never do refresh. And so over the period of time, you have this high risk to the business, especially with your business critical applications. And so that was one of the main reasons why we had to quickly move, is because of those critical applications on a single point of failure infrastructure. Now you're using this also as a leverage to force those owners to say, are you willing to take the risk? And once you state it like that, you begin to get the response where individuals will say, no, I don't want to have that risk any further. And so that's where more of the movement is, to modernize the applications, to remove the technology debt, but also to make sure that we are setting the future for better, faster to market. And that has been a trend that we see going forward within our organization.
One of the aspects of moving to a SaaS model is that the onus for the upgrade cycle is on the vendor more so than you. So is that part of the thinking that went into this, is basically as new capabilities are added, you can pick and choose them as you still like, but you don't have to do all the heavy lifting of the upgrade and the install.
Exactly. And it reduces our TCO. I know it shifts it from a CapEx model, from CapEx to OpEx, and that was a new financial model which we were going with as the company as well. But you're right, taking that budgeting aspect out of the picture of having to depreciate the assets and carrying those on your books for a longer period of time, and you put that expense on someone else, to where you don't have to have the labor and the resources to schedule the maintenance, the downtimes, the upgrades. And it allows it to be a lot more faster, to making sure that you're compliant. Those are some those are some areas that you definitely don't want to have as a bottleneck to the things that you want to deploy. You're not deploying, and you have end of support life environments. And so putting that responsibility on someone else has tremendously helped us make sure that we have those streamlined alignments across compliance, HIPAA, SOX, and all those other areas.
You cannot walk down the street these days without somebody in IT talking about digital business transformation. The issue, of course, is that it means something different to just about everybody who looks at that phrase. In the context of Walgreens, what are you guys trying to accomplish or drive, or what are the goals and what are the primary objectives?
One of our primary objectives is making sure that we, first of all, hear our customers, making sure that the things that they want to see in the stores, making sure that we're meeting their needs, making sure that we, first of all, we understand and see what their patterns are when they come to our stores, and making sure that we can have those products, making sure that we can have that user experience. They can go to any customer, they can go to any other competitor of ours, but we want to make sure that when they come to a Walgreens store, that we are making sure that the needs are being met and the customer is first.
We're in the post-COVID era. I mean, it hasn't completely gone away, but some people are coming back to work. I know you, like every other company, had all the employees working from home for a while. You also dealt with the vaccine distribution. What was the total impact of that event, a black swan event as it were, on IT teams and IT organizations? I mean, what do you know now that you kind of wish you knew going in?
It's a different way of running IT. I think we've, over the years, felt like if you didn't see the employee working, you didn't know what they were doing. And so it was more of that trust. And we had already begun a model to where we would allow individuals to work 2 days out of the week at home and 3 days in the office. So we were starting to build a scale to really understand that we had the proper infrastructure, we had the right tools put in place so that the engineers, architects, and the support teams could support the business remotely, so that when COVID did occur, it really was more of everything was in place already. We had the infrastructure, we had the tools, we had the meeting rooms and those various things that continue to go on. We had the command center calls. And so we had already begun that practice. It was more of the mentality from a leadership perspective. Can my team still deliver? Can we still be proactive and be preventive in supporting the business, even though we're not in the office and we see one another? And it proved the fact that, yes, you can be remote. We can drive and support the business as if you were in the office. And so we see that becoming more of a pattern now, is that there are less resources on site. And we're continuing to run the business and be sufficient and effective at it from a remote perspective.
The converse of that is people who don't want to work will find a way not to work no matter where they are, right? So that's part of it. Bringing it full circle, Control M as a SaaS edition, what's your best advice to folks who are thinking about making that transition?
One of the advantages that we find, I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, is that it causes us to shift the way that we make our investments. As opposed to making those heavy investments in your data centers, you see data centers are trying to shrink as much as possible, or individuals are getting out of the data center business. So that was one of the key solutions, that's our future goal, is to reduce that footprint and the ownership. So when we chose this as a product, we wanted to make sure that it had that scalability. Not only from an on-prem perspective, but as we look at more future deployments, ramping up more technology, wrapping up more applications into the cloud, we wanted to make sure that this SaaS solution was what we could use not only just for today, but going forward as BMC changes and bring those different initiatives and technologies into play, we would find ourselves in a better position to use those as well.
All right, folks, it's all about scalability, flexibility, and resiliency. Hey, thanks for being on the show.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Eric Sammer, who's CEO for Decodable, and we're talking about the way data is being processed and analyzed is fundamentally changing because we're seeing the advent of all these streaming analytics platforms, but we're not all exactly on the same page with what to do with that or what can be enabled. So Eric's going to walk us through that a little bit. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It seems like we're on the era of some new capabilities here for processing data and analyzing it closer to the point where it's being created or consumed, or for that matter, while it's in motion, moving between different locations. What exactly is going on here? And is this really a new way of thinking that we're going to like basically change the way applications behave?
I think that we are. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that the future of the way we build most applications is real time by default rather than batch. And some of the ways I think we're seeing that are that, increasingly it's less of a human in the loop and more machines making decisions based on models and like all of these other kinds of exciting things, which necessitates us to prep, cleanse, transform that data and be able to process it, like you said, closer to the source as soon as it happens. It doesn't make sense to wait a full day or a couple of hours before you process that data if there really is no human in the loop anymore. And I think that that's lighting up a bunch of use cases, especially around, the traditional ones for stream processing in general have been things like cybersecurity and fraud detection. But I think we're starting to see things like product recommendations and next best offer systems, logistics and delivery infrastructure, especially through the pandemic and stuff like that, as everybody was getting their food delivered and those kinds of things, package tracking, all those kinds of things. I think all of those kinds of use cases have actually caught up to the technology. And so like customers are starting to expect that these things happen in real time, inventory updates and changes and those kinds of things, everything that I mentioned earlier. And so I think that that's what's driving this change. And I think from a tech perspective, you're right. We are sort of getting closer to the source of the data, being able to process it and then use it in a bunch of different target systems, within the application, the operational application, but also streaming it in real time into the analytics stack, the data warehouse, the data lake, those kinds of things to be able to drive, business decisions and the larger analytics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow you. Does this also mean that are batch-oriented applications going to fade away over time, or will there be kind of two distinct classes of use cases, one for more of this real-time data / event-driven model and the other for batch?
I think rather than thinking in terms of real-time and batch, we think about things in terms of production data pipelines, which are like always on and processing data. I think that's going to go fully real-time. I think ad hoc analytics like dashboards or being able to say, we think a hurricane's going to hit Florida. And so like, what do we need to do? Like, what kind of inventory do we have available in terms of like plywood and nails and hammers, for those kinds of situations? I think that is always going to be a human asking a question in the system and is offline or batch by default, if that makes sense.
It does. We've also seen the rise of data ops, data engineers. Is the streaming analytics platform kind of driving a lot of that conversation, because we do need some specialists who know how to kind of make all these pipelines work?
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. There's this running joke that, every data scientist spends about 80% of their time doing data preparation and just sourcing the data and, getting it into the format to make it usable. And I think what this reflects is just that, as the number of source systems grows and then the complexity of the analytics or the operations, on that data get more sophisticated, you actually just need a group of people who know how to manage, prep, source, transform, and sort of route and deliver data so that people can do all the fancy math and all the advanced analytics and all the really exciting stuff that kind of comes downstream of that. But if the data is garbage, we know that the results wind up being garbage, and so I think it's super important to make sure that you're operating on high quality data that you can trust, for some of these kinds of decisions that people are making.
How do you think DevOps and data ops will ultimately converge? Because we have these applications that people are building, we're constantly updating them, but the data sources are changing. The whole thing is a lot more dynamic than ever.
I think you're right. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's a solved problem. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I think we have a full understanding of the challenges there. I think we're still seeing it. These teams definitely need to work in lockstep. I do think that they wind up having different skill sets. When I think about DevOps, I think about infrastructure and networking and application deployment and sort of like all of those kinds of concerns, scaling. And I think data has those challenges, but I think that the way that they manifest in these systems wind up being different. Like, again, thinking about things like schema evolution and, how data quality changes over time and drift and ML ops and model serving and retraining and those kinds of things. I think there's actually a subset of the ops, banner that is data and a subset that is more infrastructure and application management and those kinds of things.
What's happening with the pace of innovation in the streaming analytics platforms? Because it seems to me, every time I wrap my mind around one platform, there's yet another open source platform coming down the pike, and then there's one after that. So what is the curve of the trajectory here for the future?
I think it will begin to slow. I mean, you're definitely on the money, and it feels like streaming, real-time data stream processing and everything that goes along with it has kind of been in a renaissance the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years especially. I think that people are starting to coalesce around standards the way that they have in the batch world. I mean, if you're doing batch data processing, dbt, Airflow, Snowflake, or Databricks are kind of like your typical stack, if that phrase can be used here. I think streaming has been moving faster where people haven't coalesced around that. I think we're starting to see that with Apache Flink. Most people have decided that that is the most trustworthy, most robust system. That's what, I have a horse in this race. Decodable is based on Apache Flink, but, we have Flink committers on staff, but so we of course believe that, but I think people are starting to coalesce around Flink. I think they've coalesced around Kafka and Pulsar and Kinesis and those kinds of systems. And I think people are, again, reinforcing that SQL is the way that they want to express the business logic here, just because everybody knows it. There's not a lot of retrain that needs to happen. And so I think we're actually starting to see some of that solidify. So hopefully that problem becomes less of a problem over the course of the next couple of years.
You mentioned SQL, so will that continue to be the lingua franca that we use to access these platforms, including all the legacy databases and data warehouses that are out there? And we may not care what the back end is doing with the data as long as we can get to it.
I think that's exactly right. I think, and it's a very pragmatic approach. I mean, transparently, I think there are lots of ways in which SQL, the language, can be better, can be more expressive. So, and it certainly, shows its age sometimes in terms of its expressibility and those kinds of things. But the reality is that it is a unifying way for everything from hardcore DevOps and systems engineers all the way through to business analysts who just need to drive a report, all speak that language. And so there's an immense power in being able to take somebody and have them be productive across tools and across different kinds of data, whether it's streaming, whether it's batch or ad hoc analytics, and across tech stacks. So I do think we will continue to see that be the center of gravity for people. I really do.
What exactly do you think? Who gets this? I mean, is this the technical wonks are getting this and the rest of the world is still catching up? Or do you think that business leaders who are driving, phrases like digital business transformation kind of somehow intuitively understand what's possible, but they have no idea how to do it. And somehow or other, we're all going to meet in the middle.
I think it's probably a little bit more the latter, in that I think the business owners, you talk to like somebody at like a one of the major 5 banks or a major retailer, they understand the way that these problems manifest. For a retailer, it might be, I want to make sure that I don't recommend a product that isn't in stock for this user. Like really straightforward and intuitive thinking. I don't think that people yet connect that to, and stream processing or real-time data is the right way to solve that problem, because the fresher the data, the less likely that situation is to occur. And so I think that there's some of that gap that needs to be filled today by, to use your phrase, I like it, the technical wonks, right? Who kind of go like, well, that's actually a real-time data or stream processing problem, and I think that there still is some amount of education that has to happen there.
How will data be managed and stored as we go forward then? Because, today we seem to be shipping all kinds of data into the cloud, but maybe it doesn't all need to go into the cloud, and maybe we'll streamline that a little bit more. And of course, we're stressing our network, shipping all this data around. There's more data than ever, and it has more variety. Fundamentally, do we need to kind of rethink the whole IT architecture?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, I think there are 2 general camps of people. There's one camp who says the solution to this problem is to put everything in one place, in one system, and then get everybody to use that system. Problem solved. While that sounds wonderful on paper, it has all these practical challenges that you're describing, right? And I think that that's a real thing. The other camp is more of a federated or distributed data architecture, where you kind of go like, no, life is more complicated than that. There's going to be different business units. There's going to be on-prem versus cloud. There's going to be all these different ways that data gets sliced up. And instead, we should think about building tools and systems that actually make that less of like a spaghetti mess and more of a cleanly federated system, where the knowledge that you have and the way that you express things like business logic can actually be pushed to the right system where it makes sense to express that logic. And again, like prior to Decodable, I was at Splunk, and we thought a lot about cybersecurity and DevOps and operations and observability. And there were a whole lot of discussions about what happens at the edge close to the system versus what happens centrally. And I think that is a spectrum, but I think fundamentally the tooling is getting more sophisticated around these distributed architectures for data out of necessity, because quite frankly, that's the way enterprises work. It isn't true that everybody has one database system where all their data lives. It's just not, it doesn't reflect how the world actually works, for better or worse.
Right. When I was much younger, I remember they taught me that the ideal scenario was to bring the compute to the data, because nothing good can happen when you move data. Are we getting to some sort of happy medium finally?
I think we are. I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably hard to say at a macro level, because you sort of get so, mired in the details. But I think that increasingly there are more of these things like compliance challenges. So like moving data is complicated, especially across geographic boundaries, like into or out of the EU or the US or something like that. I think the volumes are increased, which creates lots of challenge and those kinds of things. So I think fundamentally it is more efficient to move compute to data rather than the other way. On the flip side, like I said, I mean, practically, if you said at any one of the Fortune 500, like, we have all of our data in database X, you just need to rebuild your application to run on that database, I think you'd get a lot of pushback, right? So I think that, the combination of the advancements in networking and cloud infrastructure and data management systems, and increases in things like standards for data, and improved data infrastructure, whether it's like stream processing systems like us, or data warehousing systems like Snowflake and Databricks. I think that like all of those things are converging toward, making this less of a challenge than it was historically.
All right, folks. Well, you've all heard it before. Data is the new oil. We just haven't quite figured out how to process it exactly, but we're working on it. Eric, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Detroit for KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. We're getting to the end of our day one coverage today. I'm happy to introduce, for our audience, a new company and their CEO, Abhishek Saxena. And it's a little cold here, I gotta be honest. So if you see me rubbing my hands, I apologize. But I don't think they turned the heat on here, and it's cold. It's it's in the 40s outside here in Detroit, but it is almost November, right? You would expect it to get colder. Abhishek is the CEO of a company called Unscript, and we're going to hear all about what that is and what they do, and a little bit about Abhishek. Abhishek, welcome, and thank you for being on.
Thanks a lot.
Let's start with your story. Now, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I'm coming in from sunny California. It's not as cold as it is out here right now. I've been there for about 20 years now, leading technology, at big companies and small companies. I was at Cisco for a long time doing infrastructure. I was at a startup called Nuova that built like the pre-cloud virtualization hardware.
Okay.
And then after that, I went to another startup called NCMA that built the SDN platform of today. So that's my big company side of things. And after that, I decided to experiment a little bit. And me and a friend co-founded my first startup called Orcus that was in the cybersecurity space back in 2017. And so, we had a good run. We were Gartner Pool vendor. We got acquired by an Austin-based company called SailPoint.
Sure.
And from there, actually started the story of Unscript. So as we got acquired, sales team was really excited. And I was CTO, co-founder CTO over there. So what I saw was that, the product is doing really well. And we were having a lot of challenges on the operations side, right? Installing new customers, troubleshooting incidents. So we did a bunch of work around this. We tried to write some wikis, troubleshooting documents, troubleshooting guides. We tried to automate wherever we could. But what we realized was that at the end of the day, more and more customers were getting installed, and we as engineers were getting called into these troubleshooting sessions, right? And this is really on a Zoom or a Slack. A lot of people on there, pressure from the management side, hey, the app is down, what are we doing about it? So that was really the starting point of Unscript. We try to think about this problem reasonably. I spoke to a lot of people out here today, and they have these things called wikis, Confluence, Google Docs, Notion, all of these guys. And what they do is they write these recipes really, right? Something goes wrong, go look at these metrics, go search these logs, then log into this server, run some more commands, and then come to some conclusion and restart some service, right? And that's what is happening on a daily basis. So we try to put a lot of thought around how to best automate this, and that's what Unscript is about, right? Not having to write these scripts anymore, but have the system come up with them for you.
Got it. So, and hence the name, Unscript.
Hence the name.
You don't have to write them.
Exactly.
I love it. It's a great story, by the way. So, is this Unscript? So this has to be about a year old, year and a half?
We are about 18 months in now.
Yep.
We are deployed at a lot of customers as well. We GA'd very recently. We came out of stealth about 2 months ago.
Oh, okay.
So this is our big, this
Coming
is
out
our first
party.
big event, right?
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
I assume you obviously, because you were in the industry, you knew the issues. And one thing, this is the first day we're doing interviews. It's the third day of the. But one thing that is very in my face and plain to see is that security has become very. I'm a security person. I've got 30 years in security. It does my heart good to see how important most companies here are. They're really getting serious about security. Security is becoming job one. It's built into everything. I'm wondering, what are you hearing? And you're here now. You've been talking to people. What are you hearing around this? And
so security is an interesting topic. As obviously identity-based security is the way to go. We are moving away from firewalls and all of that good stuff, right?
Well, for good reason.
And
we're not all in an office anymore.
Exactly. And so in my previous startup, we built what was like the cloud-based identity governance system. And so the idea over there is, you want to do a just-in-time security, like a least privilege kind of thing, right? And so at Unscript, what we are doing is we basically separated the security of the user from the security of the automation, right? And we use a RBAC system to connect these two things. And so what it gives you is a way where, let's say, today what happens is something goes down. Now I call my DevOps guy. Why? Because he has the credentials, and he's the only one who can make that change, right? So we are trying to change that so that now I get limited access to production, right? Just that exact one command that I need, right? And so I give this real small pinhole, which is auditable and secure.
Understood.
And all of the good stuff.
I mean, so this is almost like a play almost on zero trust, where I start you with zero.
Yeah.
And I give you not the keys to the house. I give you just what you need for you to do your job.
Exactly.
Another sort of analogy I've heard for this type of offering is like an old switchboard. Back when most people watching here don't remember switchboards. But you know what? So I have all my connections. You make a call and you're calling that person. Well, then I connect you to that person. It's like a private connection almost.
Yeah.
And when you're done, I disconnect you, and you can't connect to that person until I connect you again.
Yeah, exactly.
In a certain extent, we could do that with permissions.
Yes.
Right? This person needs this to connect to that service or resource, but he doesn't need it forever.
Exactly.
He only needs it
for a little bit. Yeah.
For this time period.
Yeah.
And after that, I disconnect the switchboard. So, I mean, it's an analogy, obviously, but
there are two models that I'm seeing. One is the just-in-time one, and the other is like the federated identity, right? Where you log in all the way through to the end device, and so you are always auditable, right? So that gives obviously for compliance use cases, also that becomes nice because I always know who logged in. It's their credential. It's never a bot credential, right? And then the bot credentials come in when there's a just-in-time type of a use case.
I get it. With the just-in-time, not the just-in-time, with the
federated identity.
The federated identity. So that's something that's been around a while, right?
Yeah.
Heard about it for a long time. In a world where we work from anywhere on anything, I'm on my tablet here, but I'll be on my phone in a little bit, and I'll be back on my laptop later, and on another Does the federated identity model scale to that? Does my identity follow me? Or is it too tied into my device?
It's a good question. It's a problem that we are still grappling with, right?
Agreed.
And, that's why VPNs exist.
Yeah. I look at VPNs, and again, I've been in security a long time. The idea of, so I'm here in Detroit. I'm going to dial back into my network in Florida for us via VPN, and then go back out into the cloud. Just seems wasteful, correct? And I don't know, I feel we're on the cusp of people saying, you know what, if it doesn't make sense, we're not going to do it. We're going to come up with better ways. There's new ways. We got to be able to work on anything from anywhere. It's got to be secure. I'm not going to give anyone keys to the kingdom because they don't need it, So what I guess I'm saying is, for me, the just-in-time model is probably a better model. I think it creates less complications.
That's true to an extent,
Okay.
because when the just-in-time goes away, there's some frustration that keeps
Yes,
coming.
there is.
Right.
And I think you got to measure the frustration level versus the security level.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting conversation to have. Now, that's not to say that someone doesn't come across with something else better. Maybe Unscript does, right? Maybe it's something you guys...
Well, we are definitely seeing a lot of now passwordless solutions coming up.
I'm seeing that too. Right.
That's definitely something that's coming a lot.
So let me ask you a question. Honestly, between you and I, they're not
No cameras.
listening. No cameras. You think, will it be possible in my lifetime that we're going to go passwordless?
I know for a fact that folks are trying for it.
I know. I interview. So from where I sit, I get a great view. I interview a lot of companies who've raised a lot of money to lick this, figure it out. And every day I'm making more and more passwords. My last password manager is this long. I'm beginning to think, will it ever really work?
Well, so if you look at a modern workplace, let's call it a modern workplace.
Okay.
Right? Most of the tools are SaaS delivered.
Yes.
And you get access to them through a single sign-on,
yes,
or something like that, right?
And two-factor and all that.
And all of that good stuff, right? So we are kind of getting to an identity-centric world, and now password is just another mechanism of authentication.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a crawl,
it's
walk,
a process.
run
It is.
kind of a process. It's going to take time, but I think it's headed in the right direction. It will take time to mature to a point where the big enterprises can actually go passwordless.
It will. It will. So, what's new with Unscript? Any new releases or news to share?
Absolutely. So we just came out of stealth a couple of months ago.
Right.
We are releasing some new features. We open sourced a bunch of our runbooks.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and so we are on GitHub. You can find our runbooks open. You can try them out. There's a Docker version, and then obviously there's a free trial, which gives sandbox access, so folks can play with it.
Where do people find it on GitHub? Is it GitHub /Unscript or?
So you can go to unscript.com and there's a link to GitHub. That's the easiest one. The repo is called Awesome Cloud Ops Automation.
Okay, excellent. So now that you've been here as an exhibitor for Unscript for KubeCon, I was going to say GitHub, for KubeCon, any lessons learned so far? I know it's early in the week, but lessons learned?
It is a little early in the week. The lesson I've learned is bring your hoodie.
Well, it is. I'm sitting here, my legs are cramping up, I'm freezing. Bring a hoodie's a good give out for any vendors out there. Bring hoodies. But are you satisfied with the number of people, with their level of knowledge?
KubeCon is a great place, right? There's so many practitioners who come here and there's lots to learn, lots of ideas to trade around. I've been walking floors today, meeting people, learning a lot of things. So for sure, it's a great place to come and grow yourself, right? And I think the traffic is back this year. I was there in LA last year.
LA was a little, but it
no
was
comments.
early in COVID.
Yeah.
So I was in Valencia in Spain, for KubeCon Europe, May. I think this is similar in size to that. I think they had about 6,000 people in Valencia, and from what I've been told, there's about 7,000 live here, and about 7,000 online. So, interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, great to see that, people are back. A lot of faces to meet in person, because nothing replaces that, us talking face to face. There is no way to replace this.
There's nothing to replace it.
Sorry,
I
Zoom.
agree with you 100%. So if you're watching this, come to the next KubeCon. Abhishek, for people who didn't catch it, Upscript is UPSK.
No, it's Unscript, so UNSKRIPT.
So, but the important thing is it's K.
It's with a K.
Unscript with a K. And is it .com?
It's a .com, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
congratulations. Look, you've had a lot of success. I'm sure this will be great. Check them out, unscript.com with a K. We're live in Detroit where it's very cold. We'll be back. I think we have one more interview to wrap up the day.
This is Techstrong TV.
I said we would be back. Welcome back to KubeCon. I missed my cue here. So it's late in the day. We're all having fun. Welcome back to KubeCon 2022 here in Detroit, Motor City, Detroit City. We're having a great time talking about security, Kubernetes, cloud native, all kinds of good stuff. I have the great pleasure of being joined by Andrew Martin. Welcome. We had a chance to meet earlier today. That was fantastic. And I knew about your book and said, hey, well, we need to come over and let's chat about the book. There you go. Get the money shot in here. Get the book. So first of all, tell us about yourself and tell us about Control Plane, your company.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name's Andy. I founded Control Plane 5 years ago to focus on cloud native security. We were working with regulated industries, critical national infrastructure in the UK, and we saw cloud native as the future. Of course, microcosm of Linux, deployment models, declarative configuration, but the security properties of Kubernetes took a while to materialize. It was the right decision because, of course, the project gained huge adoption and we see prevalent usage throughout the world. But specifically within highly regulated organizations, that declarative model lends itself so well to static testing before deployment that we could see where the curve was going, and I've been working with Docker and containerization since about 2013. As a result of having the privilege of shipping systems at that kind of time and having the experience of working within regulated industries, we started Control Plane to provide cloud-native consultancy and audits for regulated industries, government, healthcare, financial services, and we're very proud to have just opened up in North America just last week, and we look forward to going into Australasia and opening up next week.
Oh, business is good for your opening offices. That's a good sign, right?
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting, I'm curious your thoughts on this with kind of declarative environments, things that we're pulling out of repository for configuring code and environments. I would guess, now you're in London, a good reason because it's a good world financial center, right? Talk about regulated industry. Does it help? Does that help with your governance and compliance and audit? Or it might help, but it's kind of overtaken by other complexities.
In terms of our geographic location, it's really useful because there are certain gravity wells for people who are interested in these kind of things. The pandemic has changed that to a large extent, but we have Canary Wharf, which is our financial centre, or secondary. We also have the City of London, and we have a preponderance of people who are very interested in solving these problems in and around those areas. So it is useful. I'm very lucky to have colleagues who have worked auditor-facing in the UK as well. The fact that we have our own specific brand of some of those regulations makes things a little bit difficult at times, but in general, we can say there is a standardized way to secure a Kubernetes system with highly classified or sensitive data in, and there are specific deployment topologies for the shades of gray in the middle. So it's super useful to have colleagues and collaborators in that space. It's also an interesting secondary concern that it is a bubble to a large extent. As you say, it's a financial center, the same with New York, the same with California, San Francisco. And so a lot of organizations are still looking to keep up or to open up cloud native or even to start with their cloud journey. So it is useful to catch myself and just remind myself that actually we are at the epicenter of something, or one of the epicenters, and that still making security usable for other organizations is a core part of the journey and the vision of the organization.
Interesting. What do you, I'm very fascinated because I've had a foot in the security camp and a foot in the software and cloud camp, and they're different mental models, lanes of thinking. What do you think the greatest misconception for the security population is about Kubernetes and how you secure it? What do they need to know that they probably don't know just because they're not living in Kubernetes day to day?
The greatest misconception is a container a security boundary? And we have a whole range of answers here. Ultimately, the view from one of the core teams inside Google in the security team for GKA a few years ago was printing these leaky container stickers with a sad face. Containers are not a security boundary. This is because they're running on a shared kernel, and if there is a vulnerability in the kernel, because the security features like namespaces and C groups and capabilities, the way that LSMs, again, are kernel bound and not namespaced, means that if somebody can escape from a container via a kernel exploit, and we saw this with Dirty Pipe recently, one of my colleagues actually developed a proof of concept, and the talk that I did at KubeCon Valencia includes a demo of routing a kubelet node from within a container. So because of that shared kernel, we get the benefit of very fast startup times. We're just starting a process on a running kernel. We don't have to emulate the BIOS. We don't have to do this physical device emulation. But we make a compromise in terms of our bin packing, but also our security. We can then take that to the opposite extreme and say, well, a virtual machine has hardware extensions, it does interrupt, interception, rewriting in some cases, and so is a stronger security boundary. Well, yes, that's true, but there have also been hypervisor escapes for everything. Yeah. And we look at the Tianfu Cup, we look at Pwn to Own, we see people get paid for these, bug bounties work. It's wonderful that this is how we develop as an industry. So this intermediate space where we now see micro VMs like Firecracker, which is actually a QEMU-based actual VM, or gvisor, which is a full Golang-based re-implementation of the Linux kernel, occupies this kind of middle ground. We can also run Kata containers, I suppose, which is a virtual machine with a container runtime inside. There is a space for any sort of requirement on that spectrum. Kubernetes will support running them all. And then the difficulty becomes our standard cloud misconfiguration. We're less likely to see a CVE popping a shell or rooting a box than we are for somebody to make a fundamental configuration mistake that just opens the doors.
I was just going to ask about that because with all those variations, they all have their own, make sure you do the following things, right? So you don't have a problem. And still today, configuration mistakes are, if not one of the top 3. We look at OWASP top 10 or whatever, there's always configuration issues up there. So it seems like those options make it more complex itself and thus open to more issues.
Absolutely true, and I'm glad that we've segued nicely onto configuration language because I have my Q sticker on. Q is a new form of configuration language that allows us to separate data and schema so that we can model configuration, but also write tests for that configuration. So there is still ongoing efforts. It's not a 1.0, but actually projects like Friska, the Secure Software Factory Reference Architecture, integrates Q. There are reference examples, and I'm very excited about the potential for audit and policy as code extending out across the entire Kubernetes configuration space.
Excellent. Tell us, before we finish up, tell us about the book. Why did you write the book? What craziness prompted you to write a book? Because I know that's a lot of work. It's a labor of love too. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So, well, first of all, I have to thank my dear co-author and friend, Mr. Michael Hassenblass, who helped to guide me through the process. This was the first work of this size that I've authored. He is a prolific author and therefore was able to give me some guidance, including the question, do you really want to do this?
Yeah, are you sure?
Yeah. I was counseled by various parties to not take my my headspace with this, but it's a labor of love, as you say. It's something that I've always wanted to achieve personally, and something that I was so flattered to be given first refusal on. So being given the offer, knowing that I have a lot to say, and I really love writing. Flamboyant, nonsensical turns of phrase are one of my favorite things. So the delight of being able to combine a good excuse for a CEO to get his hands on the keyboard. I also wrote a course for the SANS Institute last year, or the year before in fact, so entangling all those different threads, building out proof of concepts, going back through all the CVEs raised against the project over the years and demonstrating the reason that they were problematic, because history repeats itself and actually we can learn so much from going back through that problem set, and then building the whole thing, and again, as we see here, threat-driven analysis and defense. So the threat model for each individual chapter goes through the reasonably exhaustive, I mean scoped so as to not be, let's say, a space shuttle system, but a reasonably exhaustive threat model to try and cover all the eventualities that somebody finds deploying Kubernetes, and then respond to them individually, demonstrating the actual provenance and mechanism of attack. And then once we understand, it's very Sun Tzu style, once we understand the offensive adversarial mindset, how to defend. So yes, tremendous fun. I had the opportunity to write another book shortly afterwards, and wisely took some time for myself.
Break, retool, and refresh. But just introducing threat modeling to software engineers, that concept alone is useful because you apply it here, but also other domains. Do you have a favorite place? I mean, you can get this course through the O'Reilly subscription.
Yes.
Do you have a place you like to have people buy the book? Your favorite outlet?
In all honesty, I think someone's local bookstore, should they be stocking this kind of esoteric work. We have the first half available for free, controlplane.io. We sponsor the first half as a PDF, so people don't have to rekey the examples. Actually, we have purchased and handed out so many of these. We're very lucky that O'Reilly support us in shipping them to conferences, and I really take a lot of pleasure in writing a personal dedication in each one, understanding how somebody feels about Kubernetes, where it sits in their journey, especially at security conferences, because many people are just beginning, there's some inertia in many cases, or their development team have shipped Kubernetes and they're now trying to backfill their knowledge. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Very good, you bet. Well, Andy, thank you very much for stopping by, bringing the book. I think you said that was your last copy.
It is the last one.
So you're hanging on to it. I'm sure it was in high demand. So folks can find out more about controlplane.com, is that it?
We are .io.
.io. I have 50-50 chance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so .io, check them out. Thanks again for joining. Hey, we'll be right back. We've got some more great guests that we want to introduce you to. Just like Andy, be sure and check out Control Plane and Hacking Kubernetes. We'll see you in a few.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Igor Volovich, who is Vice President of Compliance Assessment for Cumulus, and we're going to be talking about honesty and what is the current state of honesty in the land of cybersecurity as we kind of look at this brave new world where nations are attacking each other and there's just tons of collateral damage everywhere you look. Igor, welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So to the point, we have invested tons in cybersecurity over the years, and everybody has this kind of some sense that they may or may not be secure. They're not entirely sure. But do you feel like we're actually being honest with ourselves, given the not only the increased volume in the attacks, but what appears to be a ratcheting up of the sophistication of the attacks?
Well, so multi-part answer for that multi-part question, right? The short answer is no, I don't think we're being honest with ourselves about the security posture, either at the national level, at the organizational level, at the level of individual departments within companies, and individually as people who participate in these ecosystems. I think as citizens, as digital citizens, as workers who work within these companies, and I think we don't do enough to ask the question of exactly the question that you asked, like how honest are we being? How much credibility is in the information that we have about our security posture, and really are people interested in knowing how credible this information is? Can you handle the truth? I think is the question that I would ask, right? And there's this idea of plausible deniability, right? If we know about a thing, we have to do something about it. Right. So, if you have deniability, you can avoid accountability. At least that's the model that used to exist. People rely on compliance. Well, compliance has some built-in limitations, right? We're always looking in the rear view mirror, not looking at the current state, truly. And compliance is really the closest thing we've had to any kind of a consistent model for measuring security posture. That's sort of been the proxy for it. Except, you're looking at that report, it's as good as dead by the time it's printed, right? By the time it lands on your desk, it's worthless, right? So you're trying to do risk management. You're trying to understand your compliance posture. You're trying to understand your security posture really by using compliance. But traditional kind of legacy compliance has not really been effective at that. And I think that's one of the reasons we haven't really had a good model for understanding what the risk posture is. So we've relied on this kind of an insufficient model of compliance. And that leaves us in this kind of a fog of war. That's basically what we're operating under.
I'm having visions now of Jack Nicholson as a CISO, where he's basically telling everybody you can't handle the truth. But are things getting better in this regard? We're seeing more people apply for cybersecurity insurance, and the carriers are getting tougher. So maybe the bar of compliance will get higher as we go along. And is there something to be hopeful in all that?
Well, I think everybody's getting a little more serious about it. I think a lot more serious. The couple of things that you said up front was, we're seeing more sophisticated attacks. And certainly nation-state attackers are getting a lot more sophisticated. But, kind of the run-of-the-mill, the things that you read about every day, it's basic stuff. I mean, it's phishing, right? They're exploiting basic social engineering techniques. You've got business email compromise. I mean, that's really, it's just conning, right? You're just conning people into doing things for you, transferring a wire transfer of, $1 billion like that. There's no sophistication there at all. It's a basic understanding of human psychology, right? And that's what social engineering really is. But to your other point, if the attackers are getting more sophisticated, certainly, I mean, there's a lot better exploitable vulnerabilities that are getting discovered, right? There's better tradecraft out there for the bad guys. It's this constant arms race. I don't think there's been a real true leap out of that. Nobody's really taken a leap forward on either the defense side or the attack side. I think the volume's grown. I think also from a criminal perspective, a lot more people are able to enter that marketplace. And the threshold that kept them out, kind of the barrier to entry, used to be the sophistication of the skill set. And now it's just all available. You can do ransomware as a service, right? You got a couple of $100, you got a credit card you stole somewhere probably, right? You can jump in and you can rent somebody's botnet. You can rent somebody's ransomware. So that's increased the volume. And I think that's challenged the defenders certainly, but volume alone quantity alone is not going to. That's not the biggest concern for me. The biggest concern is the fact that we don't have a decisive model for measuring risk on a continuous basis and managing. By managing, I mean discovering it and then doing something about it in a truly effective way. We seem to throw a lot of technology at the problem. We spend the most money every year on technology, and yet we get the most breaches. So something is broken fundamentally in that whole model, right? We keep throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping it sticks, and at best it becomes an abstract painting in a couple of days, but it's not really doing anything for us, right? And I think that the problem is that we're not exposing the reality of where our environments stand. And I mean, at nation state level, organizational level, down to the level of a single user, single system, a single asset.
Do you think the cyber criminals are kind of laughing at us at this point?
All the way to the bank. Absolutely. I mean, look, you I don't know if you saw a couple of years ago, maybe within the last year and a half, they had a story out of, I think, Belarus, where like a grandma, which in Russia is like 55 and over, but a grandma, a babushka, was running an operation. Like she was not herself a hacker. She was not technically sophisticated at all. But she kind of became a den mother to this band of cyber criminals. And she was doing their accounting. She was managing their finances. She was doing some basic attacks. But I mean, you don't need a lot of sophistication. You just press a few buttons and you pay a few bucks and there you are. And she was uncovered and arrested, I believe, and got prosecuted, which is a rare occurrence in that space, by the way. So it just shows you that, it's not, it doesn't take a lot, right? Are they and are they laughing? Absolutely, of course they are. And because we continue to have this arms race, right? And we're always chasing them around the block. They come up with something, we come up with some defense. They come up with a way to circumvent it. But the one thing that we haven't come up with a great way to defend against is human element in cybersecurity. Why does phishing work? Why does it continue to work? because it involves humans, right? And as long as the human is in the loop, which will never go away, it's just going to continue to happen, right? So we've got, security awareness training. I think we've reached what I've come to call peak awareness. Like there's only so much training you can give to somebody before they start turning off and tuning out, right? We can do these kinds of calls. We can do webinars. We can do training. We can do interactive gamified training, right? Which is kind of the next level where people actually put their hands on something and really try to experience it. So for experiential learning that's really geared towards adults, we've done all that, right? And yet still attacks continue to grow and grow. So I think there has to be something better, right? I think we have to talk about things like cultural change, right? Where it's not just a training you go to and you check a box and you fill it in your compliance report and you say, okay, we've trained X amount of people out of our organization. We all get those emails. We only have 80% penetration. We need 95% minimum to be trained on the latest security awareness training, right? And we check the box and we feel better. But it's really not doing anything. It's just kind of a cover your behind exercise to say that in the eventuality of the breach, which will happen, of course, right? Once that happens, then we get to say, well, but we've done everything possible, right? What you haven't really done is actually try to truly, credibly influence those outcomes in the long run. And the only way to do that is cultural change, right? You actually have to embed security into every function. Security cannot be its own standalone function. Compliance can be its own function, right? Risk management can be its own function. It really needs to be a dimension of every business function. So you need to understand your value chain building. You have to understand your mission. You have to understand what are the critical activities, where the critical assets are, right? Like all the basic stuff that we talk about. But once you've done that, don't wrap security around it. Right. And don't try to use compliance, kind of traditional legacy compliance, just to get some insights, which are all, they're out of date by the time you've collected them. Right. So the real idea is to make all those functions band together. You bind them together, you embed them from the start. And this whole idea of, shift left that we use within DevSecOps, that needs to happen across the entire business. That's not just for security. That's not just for your development community. You shift left with your risk. You shift left with your understanding of your risk, how threat models apply to your business, how you build value in your business, who the customers are. You look inside and you look outside, right? So it has to be this complex, holistic model. And I've said a lot, right? That's a lot because it is a lot, right? It's tough to do. It's hard to do.
But to your point, if I'm a supply chain executive and I'm building out my digital supply chain, I need to think about the security of that supply chain as I'm building it versus building it and then coming to somebody like you and say, hey, could you maybe secure this thing for me that I constructed without your input?
Well, it's a great conversation we'd like to have. So we would like to do discovery sessions. We like to have conversations where there is no PO at the end of the line, right? We're not trying to sell you anything. We try to sell you on the idea that there's a better way to do this, right? There's a better way to manage risk. When you actually are using the investments that you already made and leveraging them to a better value, right? You can create these value multiplier effects by applying the right kind of mindset first, and then the right kind of technology. And look, I'm not here to sell people on technology, right? We all know about technology. We all love technology. We're all technologists. That's the reason we probably all got into this business in the first place. Certainly it's a story of my life, right? I like to hack. I like to play with things, and that's how I wound up doing what I do. But eventually you come to realize that there's a purpose to all of this, right? We're not here just to tinker with toys. We're not here to get the latest, greatest, shiniest new thing and play with it, right? The idea is to manage business resilience and to ensure better business outcomes, secure business outcomes, and really turning, as we said before, security into a dimension of everything you do, right? So when somebody comes to me and says, look, I need to understand my supply chain risk, it's good that they're saying the word risk, right? They're already thinking about the right thing, right? So the idea is how do you understand how risk translates to you as either a supplier, a sub-supplier, or as a consumer of these things, right? Now, something I heard recently at a conference, and actually Forrester analyst said it, and I love the way they put it. I used to say security is your value chain, and then things like supply chain immediately come into it. Forrester said it, secure what you sell. It's a very easy, catchy little way to say it. It's a great slogan. It's a great tagline. Secure what you sell. If you can understand how things move through your environment from a value perspective, it starts to make a lot more sense, right? Then your threat model kind of builds itself. So instead of saying, let's go bottom up from the tech, let's figure out, where does our software come from, where every component comes from. These are very important activities, right? But overall, how does that map to a business activity, right? So kind of get out of, the way we used to say when I mentored at an accelerator, get out of the building, right? You got to get out of your little bubble. You got to go out and talk to people who are in the different functions. You're going to learn something else. You're going to learn something new. You're going to figure out how what you do applies to them. So basically, you have to collaborate constantly. You have to have this empathic, true engagement where you are actually learning and not just coming out and imposing, compliance, security, risk management practices, security awareness training, etc. What you're trying to really drive towards is a better experience, whether it's a security experience, compliance experience, risk management experience. And I don't mean just for the people who are doing the work. I mean, for anybody that the function touches across the enterprise, from every person who gets to fill out those little reports and the questionnaires that come out every 3 months or 4 months or 6 months or whatever, right? Really, anybody that engages with this function should have a positive experience. That is not the reality today. And I think when you extend that even beyond the enterprise, you start looking at a supply chain or somebody who you are a member of their supply chain, you have to keep that in mind, right? And I think that, again, talking about the human element and how important it is, and also how much of the attack surface it represents today, I think we pay insufficient attention to the importance of creating that good, positive experience whenever somebody engages with us or we engage with them, right? As security professional, risk professionals, compliance professionals. So I think focusing back on that and it sounds fuzzy, right? It sounds hokey. It sounds like we're sitting around a fire, singing Kumbaya and holding hands, but we actually do have to hold hands. And we do have to sing Kumbaya. We have to bring everybody together. It has to be a truly culturally engaging experience, right? And that's something that I feel we haven't done a great job of as an industry, right? We've sort of been this Department of No or Department of Enforcement. It's always been all these deterrence-based models. We catch you doing a bad thing, we're going to punish you and let the other people watch you. You get punished, and then hopefully you won't do it again. Hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. We've had the first building code since the days of Hammurabi. Buildings still fall down, right? So it's an imperfect model, and security is too complex. Technology is too complex to be able to do that at scale, right? How many CEOs can we fire? How many CISOs can we fire? We keep doing it. It hasn't had an effect, right? So it really has to be more of a cultural change. And if you're operating in a secure environment, if you're a member of like a defense industrial base, right, which we have somewhere between 80,000 and 300,000 players in that field, the responsibility is even higher, right? The accountability level is even higher. You're talking about national security, you're talking about defense and the industry data. So you have to think about kind of, beyond just, I need to cover myself. I need to make sure that I show a, good compliance. I demonstrate good posture, and then, get to that next snapshot that will take a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. You have to think about it from an ecosystem perspective. I'm a member of a tribe. I'm a member of an ecosystem. And what I do has a knock-on effect on other things, right? Up and down the chain. So somebody comes to me and asks that question, I would say, let's look at how everything connects within your world. How are you a member of that ecosystem? And when you engage with those other parties, what kind of experience do they have, right? It starts with that, starts with culture, and then we start building. We kind of start going down from there. So it's not bottom up. It's never bottom up for me.
So the best cop in the world is the one that knows their neighborhood really well, right? Because they know where all the weaknesses are, and they can have some advice with shop owners and whoever else might become a victim someday. It's a similar idea. Do you think we're in danger of cybersecurity fatigue to the point where business executives are tired of funding it because they just see all these breaches, and so they're just going to say, you know what? Let's hope for the best. We'll get a cybersecurity insurance policy and see how it all turns out, but we're not going to be able to change it because there's no ROI that they can see.
So a couple of things there. Yeah, I think first of all, the point is well taken, right? I think there's a general fatigue about security. We keep hearing about it. It's like, okay, how much can we hear about it? So it's like peak awareness, peak security. I think it's peak security. Security is infinite, just like risk is infinite, right? So you can apply security infinitely, but it's how much can you hear about it? That's the problem. It's about security awareness, peak security awareness, right? So yeah, I think there is fatigue. I think there is a reluctance to continue to fund these things because, frankly, we keep spending more and we keep getting continuously worse and worse outcomes, or at least no real impact on the outcomes, right? So what's the point? Like, we have to do this right thing. So let's just do the bare minimum. Let's just do bare level of compliance. We'll get away with that, right? Next time we have a breach, somebody gets called in front of the Congress, they'll just waive that compliance report and say, look, we've done our bare minimum, right? That's been the mantra. That's sort of been the operative idea, right? I think that's getting less and less plausible. What we're seeing right now from the regulators, we've got mandates coming out of the White House, FTC, SEC. If you remember back, of course you will, but some of the audience might not. But 20 years ago, when Sarbanes-Oxley came out, everybody focused on Section 404, right? That was the technical controls that went within the general controls, and that's where it all fit, right? That was supposed to create a level of governance and assurance within the IT general controls. Now, fewer people paid attention to Section 302, which is the accountability section, right? That's where it says the CEO and the CFO have to sign off on these controls, right? So the 10K, the annual, and the 10Q, the quarterly, you have to state that you have no awareness of material deficiencies in your controls, right? And you used to be able to just get away with that one line. We are not aware of any material deficiencies, right? The problem is the regulators now want transparency. They want to actually understand exactly what's going on, right? They want to know how your program is working. They want to see the control state. They want to see how you're getting to that control state. So we talked about confidence, honesty, right? So things like compliance confidence, that's coming to the forefront. I've been saying it for years. Now a lot of people are starting to say it too. How do I know what I know? Right. And it sounds a little, philosophical, and we're getting into epistemology here, but the reality is, how do we know what we know about the compliance state, which means the secure state of our environment? Where did that data come from? On balance, most of the data is actually not data. It's actually opinion. So what I call, kind of the common traditional compliance model, it's opinion farming at scale. You're asking a lot of people about their opinion, you're codifying, you're putting in some spreadsheet, and then you have a dashboard and you say, look, here's where we are. It just represents opinion, right? It's a poll. You're just polling your audience. That's not a true state of the world. And I think that inconsistency, and in fact, by the way, that every audit, every assessment is basically a negotiation, right? We look at this control and we think it's this way, and an auditor looks at it and they challenge us on it, and back and forth we go till we're all happy or equally unhappy. And then we call it done, right? And then we come back and do it again next year. Mountains of evidence, a lot of billable hours. I mean, this entire model is just so broken, right? And I've been saying compliance is broken for years, and well, I will keep saying it until it's fixed, right? I just talked to somebody this week, actually, a prominent industry analyst, and she said, I don't want to hear the word compliance anymore. I'm sick and tired of compliance. It's not doing anything. All it's doing is making consulting companies rich. It's making budgets poor, and it's not creating real positive outcomes. Like it's not doing it. And that's the truth, right? The reason it's not doing it is because compliance is broken. Now, when we talk about transparency, right? The data is just not there. It's mostly opinion. The insurance companies are very keenly aware. If they know anything, they know risk, right? So when they look at this idea, well, we'll just do a bare minimum and then we'll offload the rest of the risk to an insurance policy. Insurance companies don't want any part of that, right? They actually want to know how much risk they're taking on. And what we saw early when cyber insurance started to come out, folks were trying to get those policies. And the insurance companies were very happy to get those checks. But there were a lot of exclusions in there, and people didn't read far enough into it. And the underwriting process was not all that sophisticated. They'd look and say, well, how far down to a questionnaire could you get? If you could get about half of it, you're fine. We'll write the policy. And they relied on those exclusions because they knew ultimately they were on the hook for very little risk, right? So people kind of had this perception, I'm covered, I'm good to go. It's not binary. You've got to read the fine print. And so when the breaches started to happen, especially ransomware over the last 2 years with the pandemic, people come to find out it barely covers maybe the response services, and not really from a tier one firm either. Like you're not getting Mandiant. You're getting somebody, right? But you're not getting Mandiant. And so there's $1 million in there. What's that going to cover? Basic forensics. Maybe, you get a few hours of incident response. Maybe you'll get some support. And maybe, you got somebody to talk to the FBI on your behalf. That's about it, right? Nobody's actually covering the loss. That's the thing that you thought you were offloading. You're just covering the support services, right? So a lot of people woke up to that, right? And at the same time, the insurance company is saying, look, we're kind of exposed here to things that we don't necessarily understand. So they started relying on those exclusions, and some of them got crafty. You saw a case out of France where AXA, major carrier, right, worldwide carrier, denied coverage because they said these were acts of war. They actually said this was cyber conflict. These were acts of war, not, and they denied coverage based on that. So they went to court. I think the case is being settled, I believe, in the plaintiff's favor, but we'll see about that. And we were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, there were real business losses, and the insurance company got sued for that. And they said they claimed exclusion as acts of war. It was interesting because they unilaterally declared it. The State Department or the Foreign Service of France did not declare it. There was no formal declaration by UN or NATO, anybody else. But yet the company relied on that. So it shows you there's still some instability in that market. But the trend is towards transparency and accountability. Insurance companies really want to know where you stand, and they're not going by your compliance report. Like they pay no attention to that. I mean, it's a starting point, but they really want to dig in and understand what's going on, right? So unless you have continuous monitoring, unless you're able to demonstrate your compliance or your security risk posture, on a continuous basis. Wake me up at 3 in the morning on Saturday and tell me and ask me, where do we stand? Kind of like classic commercial, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kids are? Well, it's any time of the day, 24/7, do you know where your controls are? Most people don't know. The instinct is to go back to the compliance report that could have been written 6 months ago with data from maybe 2 years before that. Right. So you have these kind of these nesting dolls of uncertainty. And at the core of it is, well, the broken model, right? We always look in the rearview mirror, right? So the idea is to really converge on the timeline. We don't accept that retroactive timescale in security operations. We never would, right? We need to know what's going on right now. Plus, we got threat intel. We're trying to be predictive about things. We're actually trying to look into the future. Right? We got entire companies actually named for that, right? But traditional compliance still operates on that historic timescale. So if we can converge on that point, we say, look, we need it to be real time. We demand that from everyone, from ourselves, from our program, from our leadership, from everybody who plays in the compliance ecosystem, and from the vendors who supply these solutions. That's the binary thing. I want this to be real time. Can I get compliance real time? Because then it becomes a true tool of risk management. And that's what we haven't had traditionally in this industry. So I think that's a different way to think about things. I think it enables you to actually go out and become more insurable. I think it increases your trust for your brand. I think it increases your reputation. I think it protects it. And ultimately, everybody wants to have transparency. I mean, you've got regulators like FTC who are swinging that enforcement hammer pretty heavily. And what we're seeing most recently, the ex-CEO of Drizzly, alcohol delivery company, right, got acquired by Uber. They had a breach before they got acquired. He's long gone from Drizzly. They got bought out. He's gone. He now has an FTC consent decree in his own name. The last time they tried to do that was against Mark Zuckerberg when he tried to buy a VR company in his own name. And they said they had an anti-competitive, monopoly issues. So they said, you can buy it, but you go on their decree. He said, no, we'll buy it through Meta. This poor guy now has to live, probably for the next 5 years, with a personal consent order from the FTC, meaning anywhere he goes, by the way, not a CISO, a CEO, anywhere he goes, he has to create a program that's up to snuff, according to the FTC. So they're always in that boardroom with him, creating a security program and managing it basically hand to hand with him. So that's what we're moving towards, I think. And again, the question is, well, how do you demonstrate that you are credibly reporting things that are truly happening? Like, where's the ground truth? How do you define it? And it can be opinion. And I think people are become more and more aware of the fact that most of this stuff is just opinions. Maybe they're expert opinions, but opinions nonetheless. So, I think insurability is a big concern. And if companies continue to treat risk as something they can just offload, it can be just this nebulous thing. You can't just throw it out the window and go, well, just deal with that, right? We just offload that risk. It has to be quantified. And there is no way to do it unless you have true transparency and true understanding of your security and risk posture.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. Compliance is a little bit of a racket, and you may have suspected that all along, but hey, there's hope, right? Someday things will get better. Igor, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Raj Jodiawala, who's the CEO for Remediant, and we're talking about the current state of remote computing and what's going on with RDP protocols, because it seems like there's a lot of malware moving through these systems as more people are working from home, but we're not doing much about it. Raj, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity and appreciate your time in this Q&A.
So we see all the time that somebody has a vulnerability, and invariably somebody is working from home and it gets traced back to some sort of flaw in the RDP protocol, and yet we keep using these things. So, is this just us being our own worst enemies, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of that, being our worst enemy. If you really look at it, there aren't that many options in order to get the job done when you have to connect to a remote system and have the flexibility that you need in order to get your work done, right? There are protocols or applications that are available that provide some narrow set of capabilities, and RDP certainly is one that, besides being durable, has been the one that provides the maximum flexibility, particularly in a Windows environment. So it's here to stay in a sense.
All right. So if we can't replace it, then how do we secure it and better manage it? Because clearly there's a problem. So we need to figure out what the remediation effort is going to look like.
Yeah, I think there is an element here. We kind of look at it from a speed perspective. So let me kind of explain that a little bit, right? So you connect to a system, and if that one system is infected or has some malware on it, and of course the objective of any malware is to move around laterally, because wherever it lands, it's not going to find the crown jewels. You got a work from home employee, for example. They don't have access to a lot of things that are generally operating in an island. But once they connect, or once something connects them to via RDP or VPN or whatever the case might be, now this thing wants to move around quickly, right? And so, and that's what's kind of lost, that outside of, irrespective of the protocol and its weaknesses, et cetera, whatever that may be, in the end, even under alleged circumstances, one infected system, the attacker is going to try to move around laterally quickly. And I think our defense and our protection should think about that element. You know, it's like today we assume credentials are already compromised. How robust or resilient is my organization? Similarly, an endpoint that you're connecting to via RDP, for example, is already compromised. How am I going to protect myself? Right. And then if you start from that, you may think about the problem a little bit differently and figure out how to really solve it much more robustly. It is all about protecting access in our sort of the way that we look at it.
Can we track the behavior of the malware as it's moving around laterally? Because that is something of an anomaly in itself. So are there signals to look for?
There are. I mean, again, this is where a lot of the network perimeter security as well as endpoint security does pretty well, right? But in the end, it is defense in depth. And what I mean by that, I know that's kind of oftentimes overused word. You know, I want to protect my perimeter, the network. Then if something gets to the network, I want to make sure that I'm protecting my endpoint. And this is where a lot of endpoint technologies come, and best practices policies come into play. And then the third leg of the stool, which I'm kind of trending towards zero trust concepts, right? And the third element of that is protecting your identity. Right. So I think, yes. So as the malware moves around, this sort of defend in depth infrastructure is looking at all of these different points of presence, if you will, and trying to discover the malware, try to figure out how to protect against it, et cetera. Right. But again, because it is defense, it is always going to be one step behind, right? A new strain comes in or some oddball vulnerability exists that is being exploited. None of these elements are going to catch it. And that's really the reason why we see the number of attacks and the successful attacks out there that we read about every day.
So will this movement towards zero trust solve that issue? We've been talking about it for a while. It's not clear to me that a lot of people even understand what the term is. Everybody kind of hears it and nods their head, but perhaps they all have different understandings of what that means. So from your perspective, what exactly are we trying to do with zero trust?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, this is yet another sort of buzzword that's in vogue today, right? But I do think it has merit, right? I mean, just the fundamental concept of, trust but verify is valid. That's been proven in physical security, lots of other realms as well. So it really should be applicable in a security, and particularly in a cybersecurity environment. So I do think now, of course, the confusion comes in because everybody has their own definition. There are frameworks out there. I know NIST has done some really good work on it, but how many people really examine that? And if they do, they feel like it's overwhelming. Do I have to do all of these things in order to get to kind of zero? So it becomes that challenge of how do you get there? How do you get to zero trust? And I think, again, when working with our customers and so on, those that we see have had any kind of success or moving in the right direction, if you will, is because they've sort of done it in layers. Again, go back to what I said previously, that you figure out on the network side and try to implement that zero trust element on the network side. Any protocol, any application API that's trying to, access a system is that can it be protected at the perimeter level, right? You examine, then you kind of divvy the problem up and then prioritize where you feel your greatest weakness is, bolster that, and then you move around and you continue to kind of do that iteratively, and hopefully you have a very thoughtful, potentially emergent but thoughtful security posture.
It feels like this is a bit of a journey, and some of it is just recognizing that certain networking connections shouldn't be happening. But then as we go along and we get further down the path, we start managing things based on identity. But when people hear the word identity, they tend to think about, well, that's a person. But in reality, it seems to me that machines have identity, applications have identity. So do we really appreciate all the nuances around identity management yet?
Yeah, I do think that, so you're absolutely right. There are machine identities, human identities, and then there is a second part, kind of an overlay on top of that is, do they have privileged access? So, right, so machine identities can, have certain level of privileges where they can do a lot more on a particular endpoint, like, can stop services, start services, whatever the case might be. Like even some of these vulnerability scanners need service accounts that have privileged access because they need to probe into different corners of the operating system of the running system in order to figure out if there are any vulnerabilities there, application systems, kernel, whatever the case might be. And then the other side on privileged users, I think that's where is the biggest challenge we feel, right? So again, if you think about zero trust, where you say trust but verify, let's assume that that's a basic premise we want to start with. Why is it that today, with hybrid environments, with digital transformation, moving to the cloud, et cetera, we have all these privileged identities on these systems 24/7? Is that necessary? So let me kind of make, perhaps at the risk of oversimplification, I'm a help desk person. I'm going to be managing somebody's laptop, but my account on that laptop is always there 24/7, whether I'm accessing it today or once a month or once every week, doesn't matter. I'm not, obviously, no help desk person, I hope, is accessing a system every few minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is, on occasional use, we are over provisioning that particular access. We're not protecting that access adequately. And therefore, even if you have strong password, and I go back to my earlier comment, where assume credentials are already compromised, no matter how strong they are, how complex they are, et cetera, right? Or if they're not compromised, there are remnants like hashes in memory that you can scrape and masquerade, which is where privilege escalation comes into play. You can masquerade as a super user, and now you can do a lot more things in the environment much more easily, right? So the idea is that if you start thinking in those terms, why is access necessary 24/7? Let me peel back on that. Is there a way to solve that problem? Is there a way to bring that under control? And then, again, this is not easy, and I think we have to think a little differently. And think about it this way, right? Let's kind of take this example further. You say, okay, a help desk person doesn't need 24/7 access on somebody's home computer or some work from home situation. You remove that access. Now people are going to wonder, well, how am I ever going to manage that laptop? Right? First of all, it's isolated, whether you connect by RDP or what, you need some level of privilege, right? And there are ways to solve that problem, but the thing is, we have to think hard about different environments, remote systems, access through RDP, cloud systems that DevOps are accessing through scripts and what have you, that got existing, standing privileges, and the credentials are perhaps embedded in a script or something like that. All of those things we just need to examine and think about how we can do this differently in order to protect our access. And then from there, you can go to endpoint and network, et cetera.
Do you think the bad guys are getting better at discovering and finding credentials that have privileged access? And part of our issue is that we're not appreciating how sophisticated they've become.
Well, absolutely. I think, you look at the MITRE attack framework, and privilege escalation, and because of that, lateral movement is the top attack vector. You look at Verizon DBR. Again, these are the popular reports, but even when we talk to customers, their biggest fear is somebody's going to elevate privileges in my environment because an admin logged out, but the remnants of his or her access is still on that system for some period of time. That creates the exposure, right? And that window, again, speed becomes important. If an attacker is opportunistic, they will get in there, will quickly look for these remnants, these hashes in memory, etc., and will figure out a way to then go from there. And all of that oftentimes happens below the radar of any detection system.
Do you think that developers and IT folks are part of the problem? Because it's a dirty little secret, but it seems like they all have created some sort of backdoor into these environments that they use for shorthand, I sense, to gain access to things without realizing that the bad guys are looking for that very thing.
Yeah, I think I would have said, a strong yes a couple of years ago, but I think it's changing, it's improving. And I think the reason why I believe it's improving, and of course, we're not there, this is a journey. The reason I think it's improving is because I do believe and I do see where IT and DevOps are working much more closely with security. So previously it was like, I got an IT department, I got a security department, and the twain shall never talk, right? It's like, I got my own problems, you got your own problems, deal with it, right? But today, security is everybody's problem, and security teams and IT teams, and they are at the top of the pyramid, right? And then you go down to, users that have a lot of different access, and you go down to even to individual users that become the vector of attack. But today I do see IT and security and DevOps and DevSecOps, therefore, a lot more collaboration happening in that environment.
So as more responsibility for security operations shifts to IT and developers take more responsibility for application security, is this becoming much more of a team sport finally?
It is. I think it is. It absolutely is. It has to become that way, right? Because security cannot be solved in isolation, much like an application is not secure right out of the gate, right? Developers have to take a very judicious and well thought out step before releasing their application to make sure their code is secure, and that's why we have all these products that help you do that. They have to figure out that where they're getting their software from, right? This is sort of the bill of materials software stuff that's coming, supply chain that's coming up now much more frequently. So yes, security has become much more pervasive, and I believe it'll become much more pervasive over the next 12 to 24 months across all functions within the organization, with IT and DevOps and developers leading the way.
Mm-hmm. What is your best advice to folks to kind of achieving that goal? Do I just take everybody and throw them in a room and lock the door and hope rational thought prevails? Or is there some way to kind of gently nudge everybody in the right direction?
I think it's a little bit of both. Look, there has to be increasing awareness that as you build these applications or as you develop your entitlements and policies of how you administer systems, security has to be woven into that. It's like I'm reminded of my days working at a manufacturing company in my early part of my career. Of course, I was in the computer, and there was this concept of concurrent engineering, meaning that whatever you build, you have to make sure it is also maintainable. That certain elements of the product have to be incorporated into the design so that it's not just manufacturable. It's not just, all the widgets are going to fit properly to create the full part, but also that it is maintainable. It used to be called, there was a particular phrase for it. But the idea here is where I'm going with this is that security has to become sort of concurrent and ingrained into all of our processes, whether it's developer, whether it's IT, and even line of business, right? I am working in my sales and ERP systems, and I have to put the right kinds of checks and balances every time I'm going to issue an invoice or release a payment or access a bank account or whatever, right? Those are normal business processes that need to inject some level of security. We've been saying MFA, and that's been pretty good. It is so, and I'm bringing up MFA as one way where this is happening much more broadly, right? It is a tool. It's not foolproof, but it is a tool that if you put MFA in part of ERP applications, you put MFA in part of IT administrative access, you do that in the developer environment where access to code repositories and what have you. Now you're building a certain level of resilience in your organization through that, right? But it by itself, it doesn't cut it. But I'm just saying that this is, so I see this sort of security being part and parcel of a variety of developer IT and business processes is going to be the norm. Otherwise, we won't be able to solve our security problems for eons.
And it would seem like that's the only way we're going to manage this at scale, because one of the issues that we seem to be having coming full circle here is that there's more endpoints to secure than ever. So if we don't figure out some way to rethink the model, we're never going to get there. And then it's just a matter of time before something is breached. So as you kind of put all that together, do we need to kind of have a big, giant offsite retreat somewhere where an organization just says, hey, this is our new thinking about security to everybody at the same time?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, we started this conversation on RDP and so on, and those are specific items that highlight sort of either flaws in our processes or flaws in our systems, right? And we take those as examples and figure out how we can then elevate the conversation and make people more security aware, security conscious, and more importantly, our processes as well. So it's not just, phishing training for employees, right? That it's great, but that doesn't go far enough.
All right. Starts with the people and processes as usual. Hey, Raj, thanks for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate the time.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We need an amazing set of interviews with industry professionals to give you the inside scoop into the tech world. We'll be back again next Monday, since we won't be broadcasting on Thursday on account of Thanksgiving. But anyway, we just want to say thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, as well as a wonderful Thanksgiving. As always, stay strong. Tech strong.